Why didn't you tell me about the side effects before? An hour after the three of them agreed to work together, the Black King mercenaries were loading up outside the inn. Inside Jin's room, Jin, Gilly, and Murakin sat in a loose circle. "Kid, try sleeping 1,000 years, Murakin said. You wake up foggy. I forgot. And after that long, it's hard to hold a transformation. You almost ate a cat forever. You lunatic, Gilly said. Dragons could transform, but it wasn't the blessing it sounded like. Rule 1. A transformed dragon is only as strong as the form it takes. Cat strength for a cat, fish for a fish, and so on. Rule 2. If you stay transformed too long, you can't change back on your own. Your mind erodes until it matches the animal. That was close, Murakin grumbled. I once saw a dragon turn into a fish to loaf around. A fisherman hooked him. I laughed for 2 centuries. Nearly became the punchline myself. Gilly snorted, then straightened. Apologies, young master. Lord Murakin. Why apologize? Murakin said. Humans should laugh. Kid, you don't forbid your nanny from laughing, do you? She's fine, Jean said. If he ever treats you badly, strawberry pie, you tell me, Murakin added. I'll fix him. They were getting along better than Jean expected. It had been a long time since he'd seen Gilly this alive. Human forms don't have those limits? Jean asked. Not really, Murakin said. Being human is easier. Our true forms burn mana just existing. Takes fuel to haul that much body around. Why the exception? The gods did us a favor. We're born human-shaped. Easier to live, to continue the race. That's enough detail, Jean said. Murakin wheezed with laughter. Gilly hid a smile. Jean pretended to be annoyed. Truth was, he liked this strange little team. Trust made travel lighter. Time to move, Jean said. Cat, please. Murakin shrank back into a sleek black tom. For 2 days, the Black King mercenaries escorted them to the Mytel capital with the polish of knights. They never understood why their client adopted a cat halfway, but decided the tiny tyrant named Jean had a childish side. Thank you, Vice Captain Morka, Gilly said at the gate. The main house will compensate you for the extra escort. It was our honor, Morka replied. I look forward to your young master's future. As they parted, Morka hesitated. Gilly McRollin, this may be rude, but after seeing you fight, I must ask. Why did the McRollin clan do that, too? Gilly's face closed. Morka raised a hand. Forgive me. I overstepped. Be well. When the mercenaries left, Gilly let out a long breath, then rejoined Jean and the cat at the Mytel transfer office. Welcome. Identification? The clerk asked. Gilly showed a dagger engraved with the Runcandel blacksword. An honor, the clerk said. To Carlin City, Huphester Alliance? Yes. Right this way to first class. Mytel belonged to the Alliance, which meant Runcandel territory. The staff treated them like royalty. Departure in 2 hours. Arrival almost instant. In the empty first-class lounge, Jean sank into a sofa and opened his notebook. Old habits. Study whenever you can. Gilly watched him. If I'm honest, I'm worried. We could spin your contract with a god. Maybe even Murakin's identity, if discovered, but... My magic, Jean said. She nodded. That is the one thing the clan will never accept. I'll keep it quiet. The door swung open. A boy with light brown skin and the air of a young noble stepped in with 2 escorts. The room tightened as his men met Gilly's stare. Runcandel and Zipful under one roof. So Zipfuls. Which ones? No wonder I didn't want to visit Huphester, the boy muttered, loud enough to carry. I knew I'd run into these people. Murakin padded between the groups, mewing like a jester. At least the cat is cute, the boy said. Come here, little guy. Murakin hopped into his arms, purred for a heartbeat, then raked claws across the boy's nose and sprang away. Jean laughed. I'm fine, the boy told his guards as they reached for hilts. It's a scratch. I asked for it, and drawing blades in front of Runcandels would be stupid. He dabbed blood away and studied Jean. Not a coward. Calm. Maybe he just doesn't care. He crossed the room and offered a hand. Baradin Zipful. I provoke you to test you. I apologize. The name clicked. In Jin's last life, Baradin became a 9-star mage by 30 and the next Zipful patriarch. Talented, well-liked, a hero in the papers. Jin, a 5-star at the time, had admired him from a distance. I was testing you too, Jin said. Good to know you're not an idiot. Oh, why say that? If you had let your men draw, you'd be touring Huphester without attendance. Maybe without a few fingers. Baradin chuckled. You joke. Do I sound like I'm joking? The cold look made Baradin flinch. Fine. You're bold, he said. Advice from someone in a similar boat. If another rude zipful offends you, don't start lopping fingers. It drags our clans toward trouble. A real joke at last, Jin said. My father, Jin Runcandel. Your father, Kellyark Zipful. You think they mobilize over a childish spat? Baradin had no answer. Even if I cut off your fingers today, there's no war, Jin said. At worst, someone pays a few thousand gold. Baradin blinked, then nodded. Surprisingly reasonable. I'll repay the lesson someday. Do it now, Jin said. Ow! Sit quietly until the gate opens. Don't ruin my peace. Baradin Zipful paid the debt exactly as Jin demanded. He didn't speak again until the transfer gate hummed to life, though he kept sneaking glances at the Runcandel boy. Jin Runcandel. He's going to shake the world in a few years. I want to talk more, but he clearly doesn't. Curiosity lit Baradin's eyes. Their exchange was brief, but it left him oddly exhilarated, even friendly. If he weren't a Runcandel, we might have been friends. Fine. A worthy enemy is better. Maybe a lifelong rival. He stifled a laugh at the thought. Across from him, Jin had his own red. Famous or not, he's a hassle. Every time their eyes met, Baradin flushed and looked away. Jin shut his notebook, gave up on studying, and scratched the cat behind the ears. Thank you for waiting. Teleport will begin shortly. Side effects may include horror. Blue mana flooded the room and wrapped around them like mist. I had fun. See you again, Jin Runcandel. Baradin called, seizing his only chance to say goodbye before the stream split. Yeah, sure, Jin said, but Baradin was already gone, shunted to a separate arrival hall for inspection, while Jin's party rematerialized in another first-class lounge. In the Huphester Alliance, the Runcandels were kings. The Zipfuls tolerated at best. Treatment followed reputation. Blarger, Gilly patted the black cat's back as Murakin retched miserably. Your sorry excuse for a dragon. Cook, people didn't have these toys in my day. Feels like my organ spun around. Transfer gates were only a century old, built for humans, not dragons. After a few deep breaths, Murakin straightened. I'm fine. First time I've puked in 1,000 years. Some idiots used to bottle dragon vomit for perfume. They still do, Gilly said. Bag that and a noble will pay in gold. Murakin brightened. Want anything, strawberry pie? I'll... Incinerator. Now, Jin said. They'll be waiting. Outside, the Alliance Gate Plaza was cordoned off and quiet. A file of armored figures approached. We have been expecting you, young master, said a middle-aged man at their head. Petro, second butler. They boarded a steel carriage bound for the Garden of Swords. The Garden of Swords, Runcandel's heart. More blades than flowers. A field of steel planted for the honored dead. Not every clansman earned a place here. The carriage slowed. Jin watched the sea of hilts roll past and tasted the old ache. It used to be my greatest wish to plant a sword here. He almost laughed at his younger self. If he'd accepted the truth sooner, he would have left much earlier in his first life. A 25-year-old one-star disgrace would never win a plot of soil in this garden. I was weak, and worse, I wasn't even clever about it. He closed his eyes and counted what he had now. The sword talent he'd recovered through Solderet, the magic he'd always had, 38 years of tricks and hard lessons, the recklessness of a man who'd died once, knowledge of what was coming, and allies, Gilly and a certain legendary black dragon. This time I survive. This time I thrive. The carriage stopped at the garden center. Guardian knights saluted with raised blades. Waiting ahead were his 12 siblings and his parents. Petro opened the door. Jin stepped down with Gilly and the cat in his arms. Gilly bowed to Siren. Jin inclined his head. It's been a while, my child, Rosa said first. Yes, mother. He walked forward, feeling the line of gazes on his back. Some stared at the cat, surprised or sneering. Siren's brow creased. Did you pick it up? Jin had expected that to be the first question. He knew the answer his father preferred. I acquired it, father. Not picked up, acquired. A faint smile touched Siren's mouth. Bold. Correct. That is how a Runcandel speaks about what he takes. Several siblings' faces soured, some because they'd been punished for picking up pets, others simply because it was Jin. He scanned them in turn. Among these is the one who cursed me. Why curse a 1-year-old? Because of Barasada? Or just culling rivals? Not now. None of them were weaker than he was. Even the twin pests had 2 extra years of training. And today was a celebration. Jin set the cat down. Meow. Murakan hopped into Rosa's arms. She stroked him, unbothered. His name, she asked. Nabi Runcandel. Rosa laughed. Sibling scowled. Siren studied Jin. Father, mother. This is unacceptable. How can he give a family name to a beast? Gilly, what were you teaching? One word from Siren silenced them. Why give it our name? To give myself responsibility, Jin said, meeting his eyes. He's the first living thing I've taken for myself. A name with weight fits. Shock rippled through the line. Siren nodded. Interesting. But do you understand what that weight means? I do. If anyone harms Nabi, I pay the debt back myself. The twins' glares faltered into old fear. Storm Castle had left marks. You have a talent for making enemies, Siren said. Do you feel the stares? A warning, aimed not at Jin, but at the others. Killing intent in front of the patriarch was unwise. Expression smoothed. It seems so, Jin said. Fortunately, I'm also talented at killing them. Siren laughed. Then be mindful, all of you, when dealing with your iron-willed little brother. Heads dipped along the line. They moved into the mansion. The welcome banquet began. And through it all, most of the siblings watched their outrageous youngest with a tangle of irritation, curiosity, and unease.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
It is the beginning of summer, 1794. 4 years have passed since Jin returned to the main house. We will end the training with this. Good work today, young master. Phew, is it already time, Garen? Garen Altamiro. This young 7-star knight teaches the basics and foundations of swordsmanship at the Garden of Swords. His pupils include Runcandel children when they first arrive at the main house, and clansmen who are training to become guardian knights. Every Runcandel has to learn the basics under Garen. Haha, surely you jest. Please take a look at the guardian cadets around you, young master. They're all on death's door. Jin took a look around him. There were young boys and girls around his age. Just as Garen stated, they were all sweating profusely, panting and wheezing to catch their breaths. I guess he's right. I would have been in the same state as them. 2 years ago, when Garen was assigned this job, his training regimen quickly gained a reputation of being harsh and intense. Guardian cadets are young elite trainees who stood out amongst other trainees and were selected to become future guardian knights. The competition to become a guardian cadet is high, and trainees have to undergo difficult training in order to gain that rank. However, despite their expertise and experience, many guardian cadets dropped out due to being unable to endure Garen's severe training. Jin did the same in his past life. He couldn't continue Garen's training regimen, and instead received individual lessons from his siblings. It may appear like preferential treatment, but for Runcandels, there is no greater disgrace. Even though other children are able to withstand Garen's lessons, a Runcandel child dropping out and being taught by his siblings is unacceptable. Not to mention that Jin couldn't endure his siblings' lessons either, and ended up being neglected by everyone. Having recalled the past, Jin shook his head to stop thinking about it. Moreover, you will have to attend Lady Luna's training session in the afternoon. Jin nodded to Garen's point. These days, Jin trains under Garen, as well as eldest sister, Luna, White Whale, Runcandel. However, unlike his first life, it wasn't a disgraceful individual lesson. Having noticed Jin's terrifying growth speed, Luna volunteered to teach him herself. Thus, it was an achievement instead of a disgrace. However, it brought Jin both the admiration from the Guardian cadets and the jealousy from his other siblings. That's true. Then I should go get lunch now. Will you partake with the other cadets today as well? Dame Rosa appears to be dejected for being unable to eat with you every time. I'd rather eat with these cadets with whom I train every day, not my siblings who seem displeased about my very existence. Understand, young master. Servants began to bring their meals to the training ground. There was an enormous pot with rice, vegetables, and meat. It was a simple and crude meal, but the ingredients were top class. The Guardian cadets stood in line, waiting for the food to be distributed. Jin didn't follow them since Bellup was in charge of getting his food. Thanks. Not at all, young master. As if. Sit down, let's eat. Bellup Schmitz, a 13-year-old commoner boy, 1 year younger than Jin. He was destined to fall behind in Garen's training and lose his qualifications as a Guardian cadet, getting kicked out of the Garden of Swords. At least, that was before Jin's regression. Is it good? It's delicious. I'm always grateful to the clan for allowing me to eat such good meat, as well as to the 13th young master for sharing his portion of meat with me. Enough. Sigh, how do you give the same answer every single time without a single mistake? Did you memorize the phrase by heart or something? Bellup coughed and blushed in embarrassment. You need to learn how to speak simply and concisely, Bellup. The others are ignoring you because you keep giving a speech every time you open your mouth, you know? Is that so? Shoulders straight. Have some more pride. You're a Runcandel Guardian cadet. But my grades are the lowest, and I have yet to become a 1-star knight. Geez, do you think anyone can become a Runcandel cadet? You've already achieved a lot by reaching where you are currently. He's quite timid and has little to no self-confidence. He's as innocent and naive as one can be. That's why Jin was still confused. I could see why the clan kicked him out. But I still can't figure out how such an innocent boy grew up to become the Vermont Empire's notorious Imperial Guard. Before his regression, Bellup's life ended up having an amazing reversal after getting kicked out of the Runcandel clan. After barely passing the exam to become a Guardian cadet, Bellup Schmitz always stayed amongst the worst of the cadets before having to leave. But afterwards, he caught the eye of another clan of swordsmen, the Hyran clan. The Hyran clan is the Empire's greatest clan of swordsmen and one of the biggest noble families. Bellup's talent with the sword bloomed belatedly in the Hyran clan. He then became an Imperial Guard and received the nickname Vermont's Loyal Hound. Vermont's Loyal Hound. Jin had no idea what Bellup experienced at the Hyran clan for him to change so much. When Bellup received that nickname, he was no longer the naive and gentle Bellup Jin now knows. He followed the Emperor's orders, led the Imperial Guards to battle, and slaughtered countless people without mercy. But 1 year before Jin's death, Bellup ended his unfortunate life filled with bloodshed himself, leaving behind a will with a message of repentance. I was shocked to hear he became the Imperial Guard, and felt vexed when the news of his suicide reached me. Jin glanced at his surroundings. After making sure no one else was looking in their direction, he quickly passed his remaining pieces of meat to Bellup. Hey, young master? Shush. I'm not feeling hungry. Jin pretended to eat until lunchtime ended as he vacantly watched Bellup. Bellup Schmitz, this time I'll take care of you so that you don't fall behind and get kicked out. It wasn't just because Jin wanted to keep this diamond in the rough within the clan. He also felt somewhat empathetic towards this boy. Both had discovered their true talents belatedly and had miserable deaths. If he has the potential to become an Imperial Guard, it would also be beneficial to keep him by my side. I'll have to keep Guardian Knights around me and command them in the future, anyways. Instead of becoming a murder puppet of the Vermont Empire, it was favorable for both Bellup and Jin to raise him as a Runcandel Guardian Knight, to punch the dragon in the face. However, punching a dragon who had lived for thousands of years was unreasonable. Jin gave a deep sigh and sat beside Murakin. I guess it's not bad. How much did you buy it for? About 100 gold coins, I think. Oh, is it so? 100 gold coins, you say? 100 gold coins. Where on earth did you find that money? I borrowed from Strawberry Pie. Gosh, the Runcandel nanny's salary is no joke. Jin turned his gaze to Gilly, who only gave a dry cough. Sigh, just tell me if you need money from now on. Don't bother Gilly. Really? Then 1,000 gold coins, please. I'll give you 1,000 gold coins if you write a report which explains why you need that money. And please prepare a simple meal for me, Gilly. Murakin closed and put away the magazine at the speed of light and began writing a report. He even started mumbling to himself. This disturbing sight of extreme tenacity made Jin speechless. Did you not have lunch outside already? I did, but I'm at the age where I'm growing. What would you like to have? Just a simple sandwich. Strawberry pie. I'd like a strawberry pie. An hour had passed by the time Jin finished eating. During the 2 hours until Luna's lesson, Jin sat in his room and practiced releasing his spiritual energy. I'm about to reach 2-star in spiritual release, 4-star in mana, and 2-star in swordsmanship. These were the results of 4 years of training after leaving the Storm Castle. His growth speed in spiritual release was far beyond what Murakin was expecting. However, the growth of his mana was far too slow according to Jin's standards. But it wasn't exactly a surprise since he couldn't use magic within the Garden of Swords. Still, reaching the 4-star stage at the age of 14 was an incredible achievement that was comparable to the geniuses at the Zipfel clan. His swordsmanship would also reach 3-star by the age of 16, which was 1 year earlier than the Runcandel average. Jin's growth was progressing favorably. Feeling himself getting stronger by the day was the best feeling there could ever be. There was Garen's intense training regimen, Jin's notebook, which he studied every day, and his spiritual energy he would strengthen whenever he had time. All these activities were far more enjoyable than resting for the 14-year-old boy. However, Luna's training was pure drudgery, even for the workaholic Jin. Even our other siblings who envy me for receiving her guidance would immediately change their minds if they were in my shoes. Jin smiled bitterly in his heart before looking up at Luna. My dearest brother. Yes, sister. Today's training will be the same as yesterday. I am aware, but you will have to change your approach and methods every day during this repetitive training. Yes. Luna walked towards Jin and closed her eyes. Jin copied her and also closed his. Then the same line he had heard over and over during the past month resounded. Brother, the eye of the mind. Use the eye of the mind to observe. This was the drudgery in question. Luna's lessons weren't methodical, intuitive, and physically painful like Garen's lessons. It was always about the eye of the mind. She would just repeat that. This is driving me crazy. Jin had often heard the 8-star and above knights mention the Mind's Blade realm. But normally speaking, one would start training the Mind's Blade after reaching the 7-star stage. And it wouldn't be through silent lessons like this, but by trying to scatter aura in all directions naturally. Why doesn't eldest sister do or say anything else? She always stands still, telling me to open the eye of the mind. He had never heard of a training like this. For people who wield blades to advance in life, gaining the mind's eye is the most important thing of all. Never open your physical eyes during our training. Nevertheless, Jin obeyed his eldest sister's guidance and kept his eyes closed because he knew her personality. Moreover, she was widely known as the strongest among the 13 Runcandel children. If any other sibling were to teach Jin like Luna was currently doing, he would have thought that they were trying to obstruct Jin's growth with some bullshit. Or maybe that they had become a fanatic of some pseudo-religion. I'm sure the day will come when I finally understand eldest sister's guidance. The two of them stood facing each other, eyes closed, until evening came. Once their lesson ended, Luna wore a refreshing smile. You did good today. You can head back now, brother. Jin had absolutely no idea what he had done well, but he could only nod to her statement. Jin began walking away, and Luna pondered as she watched his back. The incredible concentration he shows when he closes his eyes, and the tenacity to maintain that posture for several hours. With Jin's potential, he should realize it within a few years. Keep growing like this, Jin. Luna wore a satisfied smile and closed her eyes once again. Even as a 9-star knight, she had yet to have the second enlightenment necessary to reach the Mind's Eye realm. What even is the eye of the mind? Whenever his training with Luna ended, Jin never failed to ask himself this question. He continued pondering about this for days and weeks since the start of the training, due to which his head hurt and frustration grew inside. This time, his concern lasted until the very next day. Luna's training most definitely had some sort of effect and aim. There was no way the famous genius among geniuses would make him practice so much for no reason. My body feels heavy. Must be because I spent the entire night asking myself that question. Let's cool my head down during morning training and stop worrying for a while. Did eldest sister Luna also do the same training as what she was ordering Jin to do when she was 14 years old? As he proceeded to Garen's training ground, Jin thought about his first sister's past. As they were 19 years apart, he hadn't seen her growth and development. But he had heard that during her puberty, she was quite the problem child. Either way, eldest sister must be making me do this training because she believes I can figure out the meaning and goal behind it. 7 a.m. The Guardian cadets were gathering at the training ground. They would be sparring today, so there was a bizarre mood between everyone. The results of the spars were quite important to their overall scores and assessments. And having higher scores would grant them greater salaries and the possibility of becoming a Guardian Knight with special treatment. It was to no surprise the cadets were all on edge. What a heavy and competitive atmosphere. Their gazes show that they wouldn't hesitate to beat any opponent half dead. As for Bellup, sigh. Jin turned his attention to the corner, where Bellup was crouching down. As one would expect, the cowardly boy was looking at his surroundings with nervous eyes. He reminded Jin of a small prey having barely escaped its predator and hiding in a small hole. What on earth is wrong with him? Actually, how on earth did he pass the exam to become a Guardian Cadet? After passing the exam, Bellup must have probably been called a genius by many outside the Garden of Swords. So Jin couldn't understand the reason behind his shyness. It might be that he once believed he was a genius, but found out that there were far better and stronger geniuses than him here, which made him lose confidence. Or was he just born this way? As his thoughts reached that point, Jin shook his head. I'm already busy enough thinking about the meaning behind eldest sister's training. I don't have the time and energy to figure out what his deal is. I just need to make it so that he doesn't get kicked out, which should be more than enough. Garen arrived at the training ground, and the cadets immediately stood in line. After a simple warm-up and physical exercise, Garen announced the order of the spars and the schedule. There will be 3 rounds of spars. You will be changing opponents each time, and the 10 most notable winners will be able to challenge young Master Jin 1 at a time. Yes, instructor. There was not a single cadet in Garen's class who could defeat Jin. Therefore, whenever there was a sparring session, Jin would be fighting several duels more than the others. Garen, when will I be able to move up to the intermediate training class? Starting from the intermediate training class, the instructor was a veteran knight of the clan instead of a guest instructor like Garen. Moreover, during the lessons, the students were allowed to use aura and real swords, which was still prohibited in the beginner class. Jin now wanted to move up to the next stage. Madame Rosa stated that if young Master Jin wins against 10 opponents today, you will be allowed to join the intermediate class at the start of next year. Is that true? While the stories so far had belittled them, they were still Guardian Cadets of the Runcandel clan. They were the top 10 cadets who won their other spars to boot. Facing all 10 of them consecutively wouldn't be so easy for Jin. Runcandel cadets were on a whole other level compared to the cadets of other nations' swordsmanship academies and mercenary trainees. Eddington, Mark, you're up first. Get ready. 2 boys with resolute expressions faced each other in the center of the training ground. Once Garen's signal arrived, the spar began. Jin observed their movements without much concern. Everyone's doing pretty well. Their movements were flexible and agile, yet powerful. Despite looking nervous, they were calmly calculating their actions and scanning their opponents. They weren't Runcandel cadets for nothing. Swoosh, swoosh. Although they were wielding wooden swords, each swing was slicing the wind. Even with the lack of sharp edges, a clean blow would completely smash an ordinary human's head. Crack! The boy called Eddington's wooden sword landed on his opponent's flank. As the sound of a rib breaking resounded, Mark crouched on the spot and trembled in pain. The Runcandel's medical team, which was waiting on one side of the training ground, laid the injured boy on a stretcher. Winner, Eddington, take a break over there and stay on standby. Next up are Phils and Sierra. And so, 9 matches followed. The 10th was between Bellop and a girl called Mesa Milcano. Jean paid close attention to Bellop's spar. Bellop seems to be focused on defense, as usual. On the other side, Mesa was ruthlessly attacking him. As one of the top cadets of the beginner training class, her strength was evident. But Jean was used to this sight. It wasn't his first time watching one of Bellop's spars. Fight me, Bellop Schmitz. Stop running and fight me like a man. Mesa was hurling provocations while wildly swinging her wooden sword. Suddenly, Jean noticed that Bellop's movements were better than expected. He then realized that it was the result of the development of his eyes. Bellop, that prick. He's not just getting pushed back. He's going easy on her. Jean instinctively got up. It looked like Bellop was barely blocking Mesa's attacks at the last moment, but Jean could see that Bellop's movements were somewhat easygoing. During this exchange, where their swords clashed 20 times, Bellop had the chance to counterattack 3 times. They weren't by chance either. Bellop guided her movements to create those opportunities himself. So why? Why won't he fight back? While Jean was racking his brain, the other cadets were just waiting for Mesa to deal the finishing blow. They didn't think there was anything to learn from such a one-sided battle, especially since it was Bellop on the receiving side. Could it be? Jean carefully observed Bellop again. He scanned how Bellop avoided and parried the attacks, along with his expression. Overall, he wasn't looking good. His nervous eyes were showing pain, and his clenched jaw showed how he wanted to get out of this situation as soon as possible. However, his movements were far better than Mesa's. While it appeared as if he was getting pushed back, his actions were carefree at times. As long as he wished for it, he could turn the tables on her at any time. Nevertheless, he didn't counterattack, a discrepancy which confused Jean. Other than the Runcandel boy, the others were completely oblivious to Bellop's actions. Soon, Jean figured out the origin of this discrepancy. He's not scared of getting hit or feeling pain. There was no reason for a human to feel fear due to another being that was obviously weaker than them. And from Jin's perspective, Bellop was stronger than Mesa. He's worried about hurting his opponent. That's why he's being so passive in this fight. Other than that, there was no other way of explaining this odd spar. Knowing his personality, he's not being overconfident in his skills and going easy on her on purpose. He just doesn't know what to do and can only defend without attacking, which ended up looking like he's going easy on her. As Jin's thoughts came to a conclusion, Bellop's wooden sword was stabbed in the ground. Mesa immediately flew forward and slammed him in the chin with her knee. Stop. Winner, Mesa. Wait over there. Yes, instructor. These spars continued for another 2 hours, and it was finally Jin's turn. Amongst the 24 winners, Garen selected the top 10. Please get ready, young master. All right. As Jin stood at the center of the training ground, the eyes of the cadets shone. He was the youngest child of the Runcandels they would have to serve, and an extremely skilled monster. According to the cadets, being able to witness Jin's skills was the highlight of the sparring sessions. Eddington, Sierra, David, Mesa, you will be facing young Master Jin in that order. Jin grabbed his wooden sword and faced his first opponent. So I need to defeat 10 cadets. His highest score so far was 8. By increasing that number by 2, he would be allowed to attend the intermediate classes his siblings were taking by next year. If this were a real battle to the death instead of a spar, he could easily take down 20 of them without question. But during a spar, he couldn't use spiritual power and magic. He could only use pure swordsmanship in order to win. Moreover, he couldn't kill his opponents. Even the Tana morons entered the intermediate class last year. It goes without saying that the twins entered the intermediate class faster than Jin, not because they were more skilled than him. While they could overpower Jin when he first arrived at the Garden of Swords, their younger brother could easily turn them into rags during spars 1 year later. However, they went out with their other siblings on commissions and made achievements, which allowed them to advance to the intermediate class. Furthermore, Jin believed that there were still a few more things he could learn from the beginner class until recently. And having seen through Bellup's movements today, Jin realized that he had made the correct decision to stay behind a little longer. If you shall allow me, young Master Jin. Yes, Eddington. I'll be in your care. Swoosh! Eddington darted towards Jin and wielded his wooden sword. A surprise attack. He had calculated that if he didn't seize control of the duel from the start, he would never win against Jin. However, that was a bad move. As he watched the wooden sword fly towards his chest, Jin pushed himself forward instead of dodging. But at the last moment, he sidestepped, trampled on Eddington's foot, and swung his sword towards his opponent's neck. Be that as it may, Eddington hadn't become a Runcandel Guardian cadet through pure luck. He twisted his body out of reflex and avoided Jin's attack. Ugh, but it wasn't a perfect evasion. Jin's sword hit Eddington's ear instead of his neck before slashing the air behind. A miss, but it wasn't bad. After having put some distance between them, Eddington gripped his sword tightly. But because of the injury, his eardrums were ringing and his sense of balance took a turn for the worse for a short while. If Jin were facing only a single opponent, he could have waited to let Eddington recover. But he had another 9 spars to fight. Jin suddenly appeared before Eddington and ended the first duel. Since he had lost his sense of balance, Jin could easily defeat Eddington without hurting him too badly. It's my loss, young master. Good game, Eddington Wes. Go have the medical team check your ear. Yes, thank you very much. Next up, Sierra. Begin the spar immediately. With Garen's shout, the second duel was initiated. I'll be in your care, young Master Jin. Likewise, Sierra Camaro. The second fight didn't end as quickly as it did with Eddington. The 10 winners Garen had chosen were ordered from the weakest to the strongest. Sierra Camaro lasted about 1 minute longer than Eddington, but still didn't manage to injure or wear out Jin. After her was David McChee, but Jin's spar against him ended in a similar way as his 2 previous ones. However, David was somewhat more tenacious than Sierra, and Jin had to exert more strength than before, due to which his opponent ended up with a broken rib. A simple fracture can easily be dealt with by the Runcandel medical team. As long as the injuries aren't fatal, such as amputated limbs or damaged vital organs, the medical team can fully heal the victim in an instant. Ugh, that was enlightening, young master. Thank you for your guidance. Ugh. Jin flinched when he saw David lose consciousness and fall over, all the while keeping a smile on his face and a thumbs up. Just how many more of these muscle-brain lunatics are there in this crazy clan? Even if Jin was David's superior, no sane person would smile and show gratitude to the man who just destroyed one of their ribs. Moreover, it wasn't a forced statement. David was truly grateful from the bottom of his heart. Jin hid his discomfort and lightly nodded back. Well, come to think of it, I used to behave the same way while learning and training magic under my master before my regression. I shouldn't be judging David right now. Jin's master, who was 2 years younger than him, wasn't your ordinary teacher. They once scorched Jin with lightning for hours on end to teach him lightning magic, and also sent him flying in the air for an entire day to teach him wind magic. And they were laughing the entire time. Each time something like this happened during his training, Jin would be thanking his master with a smile on his face like the current David. The desire to become stronger can sometimes turn humans into muscle-brain maniacs. I really wasn't thinking straight back then, was I? Swoosh, swoosh. Jin lightly swung his wooden sword around, waiting for his next opponent. I'm Asa Milcano, young master. I am aware of your name. You're the second daughter of the Milcano family. It's an honor to have you remember me. I won't be as easy to deal with as the other cadets you faced before me. Today, I will definitely defeat you, young master. I'll look forward to it. Mesa positioned herself and prepared for battle. She then calmly began circling Jin without showing any openings. No wonder she was the strongest of Garen's beginner class cadets. She wasn't behaving the same way as when she was mercilessly attacking Bellup. Mesa was looking down on Bellup and attacking without considering the consequences. However, Jin was a completely different opponent compared to Bellup, so she completely changed her attitude and approach to the duel. Mesa Milcano. I remember that in my first life, She passed all the exams and qualifications required to graduate as a cadet and was quickly deployed to the main house as a guardian knight. I never interacted with her personally, though, so I don't quite remember the details of her life. She was the perfect example of an elite. Even though she hadn't seen through Bellup's true strength, Mesa was still an extremely gifted fighter. Jin had sparred against Mesa a total of 7 times until now. He had lost the first 2 times and won the remaining 5. And each time, the difference in their skills and strength was getting wider and wider. And through his duels against talented individuals like Mesa, Jin realized how impressive his gift with the sword was, a gift he never got to use and experience to the full extent in his first life due to the bladed illusion curse. I still need to face 6 more opponents after Mesa. But holding back my strength and energy while facing Mesa is a bad idea. I need to defeat her in a direct confrontation in order to plant fear in my next opponent's heads. His spars against Eddington, Sierra, and David were merely appetizers. The duels against the real elites of the beginner training class started with Mesa. And for the 14-year-old Jin, defeating them all head-on in succession would be demanding and strenuous. Therefore, Jin was planning on planting a misconception in the other cadets' minds during his duel against Mesa, that they would never be able to win against Jin in a head-on battle. Having a frontal clash, while still looking relaxed and calm the entire time. Those are the 2 key points I need to keep in mind during this spar. This time, Jin was the first to make a move. His attacks consisted of the most basic of stabs and slashes. Not a single irregular or odd movement was added. Mesa easily parried and avoided his attacks, but as the offensive continued, her thoughts got complicated and heavy. Why is the young master only using such basic attacks? While they were your standard attacks, each move was heavy and sharp. Mesa's hands and wrists were going numb from parrying all of them. However, that wasn't the reason why her mind was boggled. When we start going all out, he had the opportunity to send my sword flying just now, but he didn't. He's definitely doing this on purpose. But why? While Mesa racked her brain, Jin continued swinging his wooden sword with a composed expression. Even when Mesa twisted her body in order to escape his sequence of basic attacks, he still adhered to the fundamentals. Is he looking down on me? Ugh! Mesa ground her teeth and stomped on the ground in order to stabilize her stance. Fine. Allow me to entertain you, young master. Once Mesa fixed her posture and gripped her wooden sword tightly, her worries vanished. She also began using only the most basic of attacks in order to face Jin. Soon, all the fancy techniques and complex movements completely disappeared from their duel. They were each taking turns attacking and defending. It had become an extremely simple fight, a simple battle of brute strength. Mesa was quite confident and proud of her physical strength. She wasn't being conceited, as she had learned the basics of aura manipulation back at the Milcano Castle before coming to the Runcandel clan. Bang! SKRRT. Boom! Explosive sounds echoed throughout the training ground as the 2 fighters' wooden swords hit each other. This battle of brute strength had already lasted for over 5 minutes. The other cadets could only watch the duel with wide eyes. Huff, huff. Someone was now out of breath. It was the sound of Mesa panting. I'm being pushed back in terms of physical strength. Even Mesa knew that she couldn't win against Jin in this spar, but she believed that her physical strength surpassed his, if not equal. Mesa couldn't accept that she would get pushed back by someone younger than her. She was still not aware of the gap between ordinary people and people of Runcandel descent who own blessed bodies. Mesa suddenly shouted loudly as she swung down her wooden sword. She was attempting to regain full control of her emotions, but it ended up being the cause of her defeat. Jin didn't avoid the strike containing the entirety of Mesa's strength and received it head-on. Mesa had expected him to step back in order to dodge her attack, so she was planning on swiftly dashing forward to deal the final blow after her swing. But even if Jin received her frontal attack head-on, Mesa had a backup plan. She would let go of her sword at the last moment, grab his sword arm, swing her legs upwards, and catch his neck and shoulders in a front triangle choke. In other words, this was Mesa's trump card. Even Garen judged that her plan was reasonable. However, The situation didn't develop the way Mesa had been expecting. Crack! Ah. The wooden sword she was swinging downwards with all her strength shattered as Jin's sword hit it in an upward swing. How come? It's not like young Master Jin used aura just now. As Mesa asked herself the question subconsciously, Jin's wooden sword had already reached her neck, waiting a few millimeters away from her skin. Phew! Jin exhaled deeply and fixed his breath. It's my loss, young master. That was a great duel, Mesa Milcano. While he replied calmly, Jin's forehead was drenched in sweat. Mesa then shifted her gaze down to her broken sword. This was neither a trick nor an illusion. Jin hadn't used aura either. So why was her wooden sword the only one that broke? Damn it! As she watched Jin head to one side of the training ground to get a new wooden sword, Mesa finally realized the reason behind this phenomenon. I can't use this one anymore. Every onlooker believed that the duel between Jin and Mesa was one of brute strength with no intricacy or elaborate techniques. However, there was one hidden truth within the battle. While Jin and Mesa were exchanging blows one after another, the boy had aimed for the center of Mesa's blade each time. On the other hand, Mesa's attacks had affected the entire surface of Jin's wooden blade. Jin's resolve to break Mesa's sword versus Mesa's resolve to face him in a head-on battle. Mesa's wooden sword breaking was by no means a coincidence. She had believed that this was a battle of brute strength, but in reality, it was a battle of accuracy. There wasn't a big difference in their strength and stamina. However, the cause of her loss was the difference in their accuracy and persistence. Is this even humanly possible? Mesa asked herself as she bit her lower lip. A few seconds later, she came to the conclusion that it was indeed possible to achieve such a feat as long as one was more skilled than their opponent and predicted the development of the battle. It would be easy to achieve. However, she had never thought it would be possible to pull it off right here, right now. Despite being in the renowned Runcandel clan's training class, it was still the beginner training class. No one was supposed to be skilled enough to pull this off. So, is this what it means to be a Runcandel? I'll have to devote myself to my training, and next time I'll definitely. Mesa returned to her seat. Even if one was expecting to lose, actually experiencing the defeat always left a bitter taste in the mouth. Mesa's heart was filled with pain from the defeat, but also gratitude for having learned an important lesson from Jin. Following his duel with Mesa, Jin faced the remaining 6 cadets. However, he was able to win without much difficulty. No one else faced him head-on like Mesa. Therefore, none of them could steal control over the flow of the battle from Jin. When the final opponent fell before Jin, the other cadets all gulped audibly. In their eyes, Jin had easily defeated all the challengers after Mesa. However, it wasn't as easy as it appeared to be. Having faced 10 extremely talented cadets one after another, Jin was somewhat out of breath after his final battle. Great, I still have some energy left. Jin hadn't made an example out of Mesa just to save his energy as much as possible because he feared he couldn't defeat all 10 cadets. Even if he hadn't planted a misconception in the other challengers' minds by breaking Mesa's sword, he could have still defeated them all. Excellent work, young master. With this, you shall be permitted to attend the intermediate training class starting next year. Congratulations. Huff, huff. Thanks, Garen. I'll be in your care until next year. Should we end the morning training session now? It's almost time for lunch. How long until lunchtime? There's about 10 minutes left. Is something the matter? There's one more person I want to face. Garen froze at Jin's words and stared at the boy's eyes. Who do you have in mind? Jin slowly turned his gaze to the cadets. In one corner of the group was a boy sitting with a blank expression, scratching his head. Bellup Schmitz. All the cadets' gazes turned to Bellup in an instant. Garen's eyes opened wide as the name escaped Jin's mouth. Has the young master seen through Bellup's hidden talent? The person in question was looking around, dumbfounded. He and the other cadets had no idea why Jin had chosen him. Get up. Come on over and fight me. Jin lightly threw a wooden sword towards the startled boy. Why, young master? Bellup Schmitz. Jin suddenly yelled his name, to which Bellup instinctively stood up. You cannot survive within this clan, if you continue acting like that. Get over here. I'll knock your sleepy head awake. Belloп stood before Jin, squeezing his wooden sword's handle as cold sweat ran down his face. His eyes kept darting around as he wiped his forehead with his sleeve. He hadn't received so much attention ever since becoming a guardian cadet, which explained his restlessness. The other spectating cadets could see Bellop's soul escaping through his mouth already as the stare down with Jin continued. Everyone couldn't help but think back on the words the Runcandel boy had told the coward. You cannot survive within this clan if you continue acting like that. Why did the young master tell me such things? Is it because I'm too weak? Or because I'm too timid? Such questions went through Bellop's mind. Is young Master Jin trying to humiliate Bellop since he gets on the young master's nerves? Is he warning Bellop that he won't survive in the Runcandel clan because he's such a weakling? Young Master Jin is crueler than I thought. The cadets were all in agreement. Nevertheless, Jin's eyes were fixated on Bellop, and he tightened his grip on the sword. Bellop! Oh, why yes, young master. Snicker, snicker. Some suppressed, scornful laughs echoed amongst the spectators. But the cadets who reacted immediately corrected their expressions and attitude, as they feared Garen would chastise them. However, never mind Garen. Even Jin didn't give them a glance and kept his eyes on Bellop. I've already lost a lot of stamina from sparring against 10 cadets. Yes, young master. Having barely come to his senses, Bellop answered respectfully. And you are still unscathed. Yes. In spite of that, Jin began walking towards Bellop before continuing his sentence. I'm probably stronger than you right now. Excluding Garen, I would most likely win against anyone here in one last duel. Bellop didn't know how to reply to that, so he simply nodded quietly. That is the reason why I want to fight you right now. Young master, I still do not understand what you... Ugh, thud. Jin instantly reduced the distance between the two. His wooden sword flew towards Bellop's shoulder, but the latter somehow managed to avoid the blow at the last second, despite his panicked footwork. Following that, the attacks continued non-stop, like an endlessly flowing river. Bellop parried and avoided the sword while retreating. Good moves. Thank you very much. Schwupp. Jin suddenly grabbed a handful of sand on the training ground and scattered it in Bellop's face. As Bellop tried to resist the urge to close and rub his eyes, he tightened his hold on his wooden sword and stood strong. Why, young master? But Jin didn't answer and darted towards Bellop again, grabbed his shirt, and slammed his shin into his opponent's thigh. As the impact resounded, Bellop let out a deep groan and collapsed to the ground. I didn't call you here to have a spar. As I said, I want to fight you. Jin approached the seated Bellop, who could barely open his irritated eyes and look up to the Runcandel boy. I also said that I would most likely win. That I would most likely win against anyone here in one last duel. That means that I'm not 100% certain about it. Wipe your face. Bellop used his shirt to wipe off the sand on his face and eyes. Does that mean that the opponent you're not certain of winning against is me, young master? Finally, we're on the same page. This isn't a spar, this is a real fight. So it's time you wipe off that incredulous expression and face me seriously. I could have killed you countless times while you were on the ground, young master. But the only reason I didn't deal the final blow yet is because I'm showing mercy, for you are incapable of comprehending my intentions. Stand up. I won't go easy on you again. His tone was far too dreary for this to be considered a prank of bad taste. Jin turned around and began to widen the space between them once again. Bellop lowered his face and let out a deep sigh, before lifting himself up and wielding his wooden sword. The cadets who were spectating so far began to wonder whether Jin was actually deranged. No matter how foolish and cowardly Bellop was, the young master was going too far, or so thought some of the observers. Some even expected Garen to intervene and stop the bloodbath that was about to begin. Nevertheless, the instructor only stood on the side, carefully watching the scene before his eyes. Seeing his lack of mediation, frustration grew in the cadets' hearts as they became disheartened. Simultaneously, anger sparked in their eyes. The 7-star knight, who also happened to be a swordsmanship instructor of the clan, couldn't stop Jin Runcandel. So what on earth could the lowly cadets even do on their own? Nothing at all. Yet, they couldn't stop anger from forming. Anger and dissatisfaction that the training class's strongest, Jin Runcandel, could allow himself to bully the weakest of the class, Bellup. Where had the dignity and honor of the Runcandels gone? Was the act of throwing sand at a cadet far weaker than oneself also part of the Runcandel's glory? All the spectators' faces twisted in fury and despair as they watched the two extremes face each other. However, the next moment, all their expressions collapsed into shock and astonishment. Beam! Bellup's wooden sword was shining with aura. It was pale and dim, but true aura nonetheless. Even with that little amount of aura, a swordsman's slashing power would increase exponentially and become fatal. Aura, the weakest of the class, the eternal loser. That boy was suddenly wielding aura, so the cadets were shocked and confused. At this rate, one of the two fighters could potentially perish during this duel. Instructor, we must stop them. This is a training class, not a battlefield. Instructor Gar, swordsmanship instructor Garen Altamiro. Jin turned to Garen and yelled at the top of his lungs. Yes, young master. You must keep what you see today a secret and take it to your grave. You cannot inform any other Runcandel of this incident. I understand. In the meantime, Bellup put out the aura covering his wooden sword. However, his face wasn't dyed in fear anymore. He seemed dispirited yet furious. Is this what you truly wish to happen, young master? So you're able to use aura. In that case, you shouldn't hold back and make the most of it. Jin versus Bellup. The two of them had a short stare down. The cadets who were complaining all shut their mouths and watched the inevitable clash as cold sweat ran down their cheeks. Bellup was the first to make a move. He instantly zoomed across the field and appeared before Jin with surprisingly agile movements. Crash! Jin blocked Bellup's heavy wooden blow. As their swords got tangled, the battle came to a standstill as it became one of strength. The veins on their arms bulged as their muscles contracted, and the wooden swords trembled under the equal pushing forces. If you wanted to duel me, you've made a grave mistake, young master. SCRRT. Jin's wooden sword began slipping and cracking as Bellup coated his sword in aura once again. You should have challenged me before dueling the others. Snap! Jin's sword broke under the pressure. Immediately, time slowed down for Bellup and the other cadets during the short instant when Bellup's shining wooden sword dug into Jin's shoulder. The wooden sword had completely cut through the shoulder and was about to reach Jin's heart. As he saw the blade dig deeper and deeper, Jin caught sight of Bellup's expression twisting into despair. Despair for having gotten on the wrong side of the youngest Runcandel. In addition, despair for cutting down young Master Jin who had taken good care of him for so long. Bellup's innocent eyes were filled with such hopeless thoughts. As if I'd let you. Bang! A sudden heavy blow hit the side of Bellup's sword. The Runcandel hand-to-hand combat technique deflect strike. It was Jin's strong palm. As the sword flew away, the recoil shook Bellup's body. Having lost his balance and footing, Jin swiftly grabbed him from behind and choked him. Cook! The other cadets didn't realize what had happened in that short moment, omitting a few top-class cadets like Mesa Milcano. The fuck? Are you for real? He's nuts. Mesa couldn't believe what she saw. Although her spar with Jin had astonished her earlier, it couldn't compare to the shock she received from seeing Jin's current superhuman movements. Bellup couldn't do anything but struggle for air as he got choked from behind. As the other cadets stood up to stop him, Jin released his arms on his own. As he coughed and gasped for air, Bellup turned around to face Jin with a displeased look. Why did you stop? You said you wouldn't go easy again. Don't stop, young master. You won this fight, have you not? Are you satisfied now? Is it fun messing around with others? Bellup's pent-up anger all burst out. Jin shook his head. It's not. If it's not fun, then why? Having to push you beyond your limits is also unbearable for me. Unbearable and agonizing. What do you even know about me? Why do you torment me like so? I don't know much about you. But there's one thing I know. Being considerate is something you can only afford once you've become an extremely powerful figure. Bellup froze. He then recalled the words Jin had told him before the start of the fight. You cannot survive within this clan if you continue acting like that. You've probably realized just now, but you're weaker than me. You're also kinder than me. I like that aspect of you. But you cannot survive in this hellhole by being a bootlicker. As Jin spoke, the other cadets couldn't even utter a sound. In consequence, Bellop's weeping and tearful sobs echoed around. Bellop Schmitz, look at me. Lift your head and look into my eyes. He raised his head and their eyes met. I truly wish from the bottom of my heart that... Jin paused and placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. You gain enough power and strength to protect that good-natured and kind heart of yours, along with the others here. Lastly, I'm sorry. Bellop nodded at his words. Actually, it looked more like he was shaking his head. No, never mind. It was a mix of both movements. Thus, Jin couldn't figure out whether it was an affirmation or a denial. The boy, with tears running down his face, walked towards the other cadets. Suddenly, the servants carrying large pots of crude dishes appeared at the training ground. The atmosphere seems a bit. Should we come back later? Instructor Garen? Young Master Jin. As the servants hesitated on what to do, Bellop spoke up. Please go get your serving on your own today, young master. Jin chuckled awkwardly. All right. In fact, I'll bring your portion too today. As lunchtime came to an end, Garen quietly approached Jin before the afternoon training session began. So, you've awakened Bellop Schmitz. The boy has outstanding talents, but his heart and mind were a bit weak, so I wasn't sure what to do. I am grateful to you, young master. It must have been a great stimulus for him. Garen. Yes. Don't run your mouth thoughtlessly. Awaken him? His heart and mind? No matter what my intentions were, it must have been a traumatic experience for Bellop. Your actions and behavior today were befitting of a Runcandel. Please do not worry too much about that. He is but a guardian cadet. He is not worthy of your pity, his soon-to-be master. Jin stared at Garen, before letting out a small sneer. Swordsmanship instructor of the Guardian Cadets, Garen Altamiro. The only field you are allowed to judge and evaluate me in is swordsmanship. Do not overstep your boundaries and keep those impertinent opinions to yourself. Garen felt his stomach drop as Jin stated his point. The Black King mercenaries I met before once described him as a young overlord, and sure enough, he's one terrifying predator. Garen smirked and immediately lowered his head. My sincere apologies, young master. As you have ordered, I shall take today's events to the grave. The unique Genesis Knight in the world, Jin Runcandel. After he welcomed his youngest son at the Garden of Swords 4 years ago, he immediately left for the Black Sea again. The question the boy had asked before was still weighing on his mind. Is God Sodaret stronger than Father? I can be stronger than a god. The monsters at the Black Sea didn't attack Jin. They didn't even approach the center of the Black Sea, where Jin was currently sitting. It was their method of conserving the natural ecosystem. To eat and be eaten, Jin quite liked the simplicity of this system, which was why he came to the Black Sea so often. A few days ago, a knight came looking for him at the Black Sea. The knight in question had fought and killed countless monsters and bathed in their blood in order to see Jin. This is Khan, Patriarch. Jin didn't turn around to face him and simply opened his eyes. He was sitting cross-legged, but his body was levitating above the ground by a handspan. Speak freely, Khan. Khan approached him while wiping off the blood on his armor. He then gave his report with a stiff face, and Jin waited for Khan to finish speaking with a composed look. However, halfway through the report, the corners of Jin's lips rose to form a grin. That is all. The floating body slowly began its descent onto the ground. So that's what the youngest did. Indeed, Patriarch. The content of Khan's report was the details of the uproar at the beginner training class caused by Jin's recent actions. Although Garen had said that he wouldn't disclose the details of the incident to other Runcandels, he couldn't keep it a secret from the Runcandel Patriarch. Therefore, he informed Khan, Jin's right-hand man, about the incident. He didn't tell other individuals, however. Garen wasn't afraid of the current Jin, but he did fear the future Jin. Kuh! Jin suddenly threw his head back and laughed out loud. So those are the principles the youngest believes in. He'll use overwhelming force to dominate others, while also embracing and caring for the weaker humans at times. Khan didn't answer and simply lowered his head. Smirk. A wide grin formed on Siren's face. In recent years, he was laughing so much, far more than he had ever laughed after reaching the demigod realm. Then we'll need to check whether those principles of his hold any value or worth. Yes, Patriarch. Return and tell this to Garen. Before he moves up to the intermediate training class, have the youngest do a... In consequence, Khan had to spend another several days getting out of the Black Sea and fighting monsters in order to relay the command to Garen. January 1795. Jin, now 15 years old, was acknowledged as a 3-star knight and was enjoying the final break of the beginner training class. Every year, cadets receive a 2-week vacation during the first month. It was their one and only break, as the cadets trained every single day the rest of the year. It was more or less a vacation. Most cadets return to their hometowns during this period. Competent cadets train on their own and inspect their equipment, whereas outstanding cadets roam around the Huphester Alliance's smithies and order custom-made swords. Why do they order swords, you ask? The reason is that they're aware of how they're the most likely candidates to advance to the next class. The results and nominees are announced only after the end of the 2-week break, but most of the time, it's quite easy to predict who will advance to the intermediate class. Starting from the intermediate training class, the cadets no longer use wooden swords. They will have to use personal swords tailor-made for them. The excelling cadets of the beginner class, such as Mesa Milcano, all temporarily left the Garden of Swords in order to acquire their weapons. Even though the results weren't revealed yet, these cadets all knew they would definitely be chosen. Gee, my brother. Yes, eldest sister. Needless to say, the top ranker of the beginner class this year was Jin. If Jin were a cadet like Mesa and the others, he would have been roaming around the smithies and forges in Huphester. However, he was a Runcandel. He was the youngest son of the distinguished clan of Swordmasters, which had far too many invaluable and top-notch swords. Therefore, he only had to grab a random sword in the clan's armory. He didn't need a tailor-made weapon. Amongst the thousands of swords sitting in the armory, a couple of them should fit in his hands perfectly at the very least. It was quite troublesome finding a sword that suited you, you know? However, Jin couldn't choose his sword himself. Luna said that she wanted to gift him his sword and spend an entire month going through the armory. In any case, Luna was far better at spotting good swords compared to the current Jin, so he had nothing to lose by accepting her suggestion. I look forward to it, eldest sister. Bang! Luna removed the enormous axe sword on her back and laid it on the floor. It was a different sword compared to her beloved Crantel. Jin couldn't help but make a confused face. The axe sword Luna had laid seemed even bigger than himself. On the other hand, Luna's eyes were glittering with impatience. This sword was once called the Bale's Slaughterer. It's the weapon I enjoyed using back in my teens. What is an axe sword, you ask? Just as its name implies, it's a sword with an axe blade attached to the tip. It's massive, heavy, and bulky. The history of axe swords is not very long. It's a weapon that Jin Runcandel personally invented at the age of 15. Until then, no one had used a weapon like this. In other words, the name Bale's Slaughterer originated from Luna's own chaotic, wild, and unstable period of adolescence. So, do you like it? Luna spoke with innocent eyes full of hopes and expectations. Chills ran up Jin's spine as he coughed awkwardly. I don't quite think this one is suitable. Luna's joyful and hopeful mood immediately crashed down on her. She wore a sullen smile as a glum atmosphere formed around her. I was just joking. Just joking. It didn't seem like a joke, though. Jin barely stopped himself from saying that out loud, and just chuckled awkwardly. For a few more seconds, Luna held onto the pipe dream that Jin would take the axe sword. However, she soon gave up and sighed deeply before taking out another sword. It can't be helped. What about this one, then? The sword Luna showed next was inside a neat, black scabbard without a single ornament or decoration. It appeared ordinary, but when Jin received the sword from Luna, his eyes began to tremble. Since you chose Barasada during the selection ritual, it's only fitting that you get this blade. It also suits your swordsmanship style. SRRRT. As he grabbed the handle and pulled, a snow-white blade entered his sight. Bradamanti. Jin admired the pure, undyed sword as he shouted the weapon's name in his mind. He gazed at the multicolored reflection that shone like a stellar diamond, as if he had fallen head over heels for it. Bradamanti. It is the brother of Banished, the blade once used by the first patriarch Jin Runcandel. Excluding Banished, there were very few swords that outperformed Bradamanti in the Runcandel armory. Before forging Banished, the legendary blacksmith, Pekan Minche, created Bradamanti as a prototype, which is now known as one of the finest swords around the world. You seem to like it. Of course, eldest sister. It's one of the greatest weapons, even amongst the swords we have in the clan. Thank you very much. Jin's tone was composed, but he was so happy he wanted to jump around in joy right now. If it weren't for Luna, it would have been practically impossible for me to take Bradamanti from the armory. The clan wouldn't have allowed it. Still, to think she'd give me Bradamanti. It's the sword Mirakin told me to obtain in the future. Since Bradamanti was an excellent sword, many of Jin's siblings were aiming for it. But there was a reason why this sword was special to Jin. Spiritual energy. When Banished and Bradamanti absorb spiritual energy, they reveal their true worth. But this was a feature only accessible by those who control shadows. Even though many of our siblings yearn for Bradamanti, how can I ever repay you for this, eldest sister? Repay? It seems you're still uncomfortable when around me. How saddening. That's not what I meant, sister. In order to soothe my sorrow, I'll have to bully you. Close your eyes right now, brother. Let's begin our lesson. Yes. Luna grinned mischievously as she rubbed Jin's head and messed up his hair. Today again, I will be telling you to observe using the eye of the mind. I am aware, but unlike before, I will tell you something else you need to know about the eye of the mind. What is it, sister? Luna crouched down and held Jin's hands. Know that within our family, where siblings are busy trampling over each other, there's at least one person who loves you unconditionally without expecting something in return. So don't sadden your sister any more than this. I'm sorry, sister. Before you were born, I was spending my days in loneliness inside this family. But one victim is more than enough. There's no need for you to go through that too. Jin decided not to question Luna's goodwill and love from here on out. It was true that this kind-hearted sister had turned a blind eye to Jin and his misery in his first life. But Jin was willing to turn the page and forget her past disregard towards him. I don't even know everything about her from that life. Maybe she was going through difficult times. I shouldn't judge with incomplete information. It's too soon. What? Your control over spiritual energy is still imperfect in order to awaken Bradamanti. You need to reach at least 3-star spiritual release in order to attempt awakening the sword. 3-star? I think I'll reach that soon enough. I should be able to use the sword soon. Thump! Mirakin closed the erotic magazine in his hands with force and stared at Jin. Listen carefully, kid. Banished and Bradamanti. Those 2 spirit swords are dangerous weapons that mustn't be awakened carelessly. 3-star is the bare minimum requirement. But use Bradamanti as an ordinary sword until you reach 5-star, understood? But I don't have a lot of patience. I guess I'll have to reach 5-star within the next year. You're right. Even if you're the best spirit controller in his teens, and you eat spiritual energy every meal instead of real food, that's still impossible. Enough with the nonsense. Even a street dog would stop on its path to laugh at you right now. How immature. Jin couldn't believe the individual in front of him was really a dragon who has existed for over 3,000 years. Jin frowned visibly and snatched away the magazine in Mirakin's hands. What was that? Huh? Something about a street dog? Say that again. I didn't hear you. Give my magazine back. Get it back, you brat. Do you know how hard it was to... Young master. The bickering duo paused and turned to Gilly, who was running towards them. She seemed to be in a hurry. What's the matter, Gilly? Instructor Garen is asking for you, young master. Why would Garen want to see me during the break? If he has something to say, tell him to come find me personally. That's... As her eyes shook in worry, Gilly approached Jin and spoke quietly. He says he needs to give a rundown of the operation to you using the map, young master. Operation? Yes, Instructor Garen has assigned you your first mission. And apparently, you'll need to depart as soon as the break ends. Jin put down the magazine in his hand. A mission? True, now that I'm a 3-star knight, it's about time I was given my first assignment. But leaving as soon as the break ends. Something was fishy. Missions were given starting from the intermediate training class. As missions usually concerned assassination, combat, monster subjugation, etc., the beginner class wasn't involved with them. Moreover, the advancement to the intermediate class happened 1 month after the break for Runcandel cadets. So it was odd to be assigned a mission right after the break. Well, I guess I could technically be considered a member of the intermediate class since my advancement was confirmed a few months ago. Maybe they judged that it wouldn't matter to give me an assignment. Once Jin sorted out his thoughts and nodded, Gilly gave him additional information. And the participants of this mission are 10 members of the beginner training class, including you, young master. Something is amiss. You should quickly go talk to Instructor Garen. There were already 3 cadets inside Garen's office. They were standing stiffly and nervously from the sudden summons. Garen was explaining the mission while looking at the map on the wall. Due to the excellent results of this year's beginner class, this mission was specially assigned to... You've arrived, young master. With Jin's arrival, Garen wore a faint smile and bowed. While the beginner class normally doesn't receive missions, this case wasn't the first time it had happened. If the beginner class's cadets showed outstanding performance and results, they were issued missions on rare occasions. The current batch of beginner class cadets could only show so much growth worthy of being sent on a mission due to Jin's influence. During Jin and Bellop's duel last year, the latter wasn't the only individual to be awakened. While it wasn't Jin's intention or plan, the battle from that fateful day had greatly impacted the other spectating cadets. We were given a mission. Garen? Yes, young master. This mission involves 10 beginner class cadets, including you. Jin turned his attention to the world map behind Garen. The red symbol must be the mission's destination. That location is someplace near the Zhan Kingdom. The Zhan Kingdom was in proximity to the land of the beast men. In fact, it was adjacent to the headquarters of the most dangerous race, the White Wolf tribe. Travelers avoid that area, adventurers flock to it, and mercenaries detest it. I've also contacted the cadets who have temporarily left the Garden of Swords. There are 10 participants, including you, young master. You will have to carry out the mission in 2 different groups. You'll divide the 10 participants of the beginner class into 2 groups. Indeed, you'll be the leader of Group 1, young master. Group 2 will be led by Scott Limon. Scott Limon. While the results hadn't been announced yet, everyone predicted that Mesa or Scott would be the runner-up cadet of the beginner class, behind Jin. Even so, Scott is only at the level of a 2-star knight. If it's a mission near the Zhan Kingdom, it's highly probable that it'll involve beastmen. Something was off. Even if they were Runcandel cadets, they were merely rookies between the age of 14 to 16. They weren't the appropriate participants to carry out a mission dealing with beastmen. Did one of my siblings bribe Garen to assign us on a difficult mission? No. Seeing Garen's confident face, I'm pretty sure Father personally instructed him to do so. But why would Siren do that? Jin calmly thought to himself. I highly doubt it's simply because I'm connected to Soderette, or because of my high scores. In that case, the incident with Bellop was probably relayed to Father. I see. I'm starting to see the full picture now. Jin calmly nodded. Then one group must be composed of 5 members. Who will I be working with? Yes. Group 1 is composed of Bellop, Phils, Eddington, Sierra, and you, young master. Scott's group is composed of Mesa, Kiko, Taimont, and Jushin. Having heard the formation of the groups, Jin immediately saw through Siren's intentions. The 4 cadets of his group were all middle to low-ranked within the beginner class, with the exception of Bellop. Having awakened with the duel against Jin, Bellop was now part of the mid-upper ranks. On the other hand, Scott's team was composed of top-rank cadets. There was only one explanation behind this uneven formation of groups. Father wants to test me. He wants to check if my principles of leading those weaker than me won't change during this mission. In that case, this mission was certain to be troublesome. As Jin's intuition told him so, he spoke up again. Give me a rundown of the mission and operation. The mission is to scout the vicinity of the Zhan Kingdom's southern border. It seems a certain tycoon's son went missing in that area. The groups will be in charge of separate areas, and as soon as you find a missing person or clues, you must report back to me. The cadets in the office all calmed down when they learned that the mission was simply a search and report task. And after having reported, if the victim's survival is confirmed, we will dispatch Guardian Knights in order to perform a rescue operation. In the meantime, Groups 1 and 2 will return to base. But if the victim is reported dead, the mission will come to an end as long as there aren't additional requests from the client. Sounds simple enough. Yes. However, you must move with prudence as the chances of encountering beastmen are high. I assume so. And since the Zhan Kingdom's southern border is where the White Wolf tribe is most active, we'll have to be extra careful. The White Wolf tribe, just as their name implies, they're a race of beastmen who look like wolves with white fur. They're famous for being the most talented and skilled amongst beastmen in combat. Young Master, if you encounter White Wolf beastmen during the mission, you are to abandon the mission and retreat immediately. That goes for everyone else too. I also know that, no matter how outstanding this year's batch of cadets are, we're no match to the White Wolf warriors. No need to worry. Garen smiled at his words. I'm not concerned. I've personally witnessed how much this year's cadets have grown, including you, young master. However, one never knows what kinds of unpredictable dangers are lurking around oneself. Jean stared straight back at Garen and also smirked. You talk as if a dangerous incident will definitely occur during the mission, Garen. You've caught me. Personally, I can't wait to witness your marvelous figure as you overcome the situation, young master. You're a good teacher. Inform me when the cadets who aren't at the garden have all returned. Understood. 3 days later, the cadets' break ended. Without further ado, the beginner class's mission began. Jean and 9 other cadets went to the transfer gate in order to depart to the Zhan Kingdom. It's an honor to be able to carry out our very first mission with you, young master. Group 2 will do our best not to inconvenience you. Scott approached Jean and spoke as they waited for the transfer gate to open. Haha, are you putting pressure on me, Scott Limon? That's absolutely not the case. I am simply showing my gratitude toward the young master for giving us the opportunity to carry out our first mission while still in the beginner class. I'm just kidding. Scott was extremely loyal towards the Runcandels, and his admiration and respect toward Jean were immense as well. However, Scott wasn't the only one to hold Jean in high esteem. Hey, Group 1, make sure you don't get in young Master Jin's way, and assist him to the best of your abilities. As Mesa sharply declared, the cadets of Group 1 all nodded in sync. Moreover, if we successfully carry out this mission, you may be given a chance to advance to the intermediate class despite your low scores. Do you understand? We understand, Mesa. We'll do our best. Jean smiled to himself as he watched their interactions. It may seem like Mesa was being rude to them, but she truly hoped from the bottom of her heart that all the members of Group 1 would advance to the next class with her. She behaved like the disciplinarian of the class. It seemed she has an aptitude for it. But in truth, she was a big-hearted cadet, one who cared most about her comrades. There certainly was something special about this year's batch of beginner class cadets. They all had developed strong bonds centered around Jean. This was a rare case within the competitive system of the Runcandel clan. Moreover, in most cases where strong bonds formed between cadets, they excluded the young masters and ladies from the group. However, during the past few years, Jean had completely made these cadets his subjects. Quiet, everyone. As the transfer gate will soon open, I shall issue a command. Yes. The cadets gathered around Jean in a circle. As soon as we arrive at the southern border, we will set camp at the center of the area. Once everyone's done preparing the campsite, Groups 1 and 2 will go their separate ways and begin surveying the area in earnest. Jean pointed at the map before continuing his speech. The camp's use is for sharing information between us and reporting casualties. Each group will send a member to the campsite in order to share information once a day at a prearranged time. Understood, young master. You shall refer to me as captain and not young master during the mission. And members other than casualties are not to rest at the campsite. However, each group may take breaks at their own discretion. Any questions? None, Captain. That is all. Let's hope that our target is alive and well. A few moments later, the transfer gate activated and everyone's bodies were surrounded by glowing mana. Once the teleportation was completed, the cadets and Jin found themselves at the transfer gate in the central southern region of the Jin Kingdom. Normally speaking, they would have had to go through all the administrative procedures after arriving. But as soon as the employees saw the robes the cadets were wearing, they skipped all the procedures. The robes had the Runcandel's black sword emblem on it. 3 days have passed since they arrived in the southern region of the Jin Kingdom. The cadets had constructed the campsite and were surveying the area, but to no avail. The Jin Kingdom's southern region was a land composed of grassy plains and forests. They were thoroughly searching through the open, grassy fields, but finding traces of a single missing human wasn't a simple task. It seems we'll have to focus our search inside the forest. There isn't a single clue in the grasslands. Captain, Eddington says he saw Watertail Beastmen earlier. Watertail Beastmen? If they're here, it's unlikely we'll encounter White Wolf Beastmen. Watertail Tribe Beastmen are a docile and gentle tribe that catch fish in rivers or seas using their harpoon-shaped tails. They aren't found in areas where White Wolf Beastmen or Red Tiger Beastmen reside. Watertail Beastmen always avoid predators when building their villages. The one who'll return to camp and meet Group 2 today is Bellup, right? That is correct. Bellup, depart for the campsite 2 hours earlier than usual today. You'll be slowed down by the sleet. And once you're done exchanging info, go to Area 13 instead of here. We'll be surveying that zone. Understood, Captain. Groups 1 and 2 were meeting up at 9 p.m. every evening at the camp in order to exchange information. Once Bellup left the group, the other members also began moving towards Area 13. Area 13 was a woodland that hadn't been surveyed yet. Something's off. Even though Father personally gave us this mission, nothing has happened so far. Was I mistaken thinking that he was trying to test me? No incidents happened at Area 13 either, and they couldn't find any clues about the missing person. The only special incident that occurred was that they were gifted roasted fish from the Watertail tribe village they found by coincidence. Missing human? We not know. Watertail tribe, nice. You all miserable look. Fish take. Gift. Yeah, I know. Thanks. They're well cooked. We'll repay you next time we come over. Having searched the area well past midnight, the members of Group 1 were now waiting for Bellup to return in the rain as they wiped their wet swords. As the sleet continued, they found it meaningless to continue the search in the darkness in this weather. Since we didn't find anything even after surveying Area 13, we'll have to approach the Beastman's territory in order to continue the mission. However, surveying the Beastman's territory wasn't a mission a beginner-class cadet could do. There's no need to do such an unreasonable thing just to obtain good results. It's foolish to go so far. We should spend the remaining 3 days checking the surveyed areas again before ending the mission. Bellup finally returned from the camp as the watches neared 2 a.m. Young Master Jin. He was in such a hurry that he had completely forgotten about calling him captain. The cadets on standby stood up and rushed to Bellup as well. What's the matter, Bellup? Group 2 was attacked. Even Kiko, who was sent to the camp by them, had minor injuries. Everyone prepare to move. Was it Beastmen? The cadets immediately stood in line, ready to start running at any moment. No, they say it was humans. Group 2 cannot use their flares as they have gone into hiding, so we must hurry to them. Their numbers? They've confirmed 3 individuals. There's no way a mere 3 idiots would attack Runcandel cadets. There are definitely more of them somewhere. Eddington, David, once we get near the campsite, search for the assailants. Yes. If you find them, do not engage. Report back to me as fast as possible. Jin hadn't expected the cadets to be attacked by humans instead of beastmen. If they still attacked us despite our Runcandel robes, Are they radical, zipful followers? As they urgently ran, Jin continued to listen to Belop's report. The assailants were all wearing masks, so Group 2 couldn't identify them. But they did mention that the attackers were using the most widespread and common long swords in the Zhan Kingdom. In that case, it was likely this was the work of insiders from the Zhan Kingdom. But he still couldn't put aside the possibility that zipful followers were behind this attack. It was possible that they had purposefully used weapons manufactured in Zhan in order to confuse us. If Group 2 managed to escape after the battle, the enemies mustn't be 5-star knights or higher. The problem is that we don't know who they are. Why they attacked Group 2? If they were indeed radical, zipful followers, and if they had come here after hearing that Runcandel cadets were carrying out a mission in this area, then they would have targeted Group 1 first, as Jin was part of it. After running nonstop for 3 hours, the campsite was finally in sight. They would have arrived faster if they had traveled through the grasslands instead of the woodlands, but they couldn't afford to get discovered by the enemies. Eddington and David separated from the group in order to search for the attackers. The only ones remaining near the camp were Jin, Belop, and Sierra. 5 a.m. If they headed towards Group 2's hiding place now, dawn would arrive. Since they still didn't know the number of enemies and their forces, the cadets and Jin would be at a disadvantage if light returned. I hope Group 2 hid themselves properly. They're all skilled kids, so I shouldn't have to worry too much. The remaining 3 members of Group 1 began to move again. They planned on joining Group 2 at their hideout and waiting for Eddington and David to return with details on the assailants. Jin and the others swiftly arrived at the hideout, but Group 2 was no longer there. All that was left was a letter at the entrance to the cave and puddles of blood on the ground. Why, young master? This. Looks like I got found already. Jin clenched and ground his teeth at this sight. These mother few. I don't know who you are, but I will find you, and I will kill you all. Jin hadn't felt anger in a long time. Even during his sudden death in his first life, he felt more despair than rage. And after his regression, he was busy making the most of his new life every day and had no time to think about his emotions. But this time, his head heated up with rage in an instant. The bloodstains around the cave all came from children in their teens. Moreover, those children were his subordinates who were following him. Jin closed his eyes and composed himself before acting rashly. He had to keep a cool head in order to find the enemies and avenge the cadets. Calm down, Belop. The blood hasn't fully dried yet. It hasn't been long since they were found. Jin spoke to Belop, who was gasping heavily. There was so much blood that he thought Group 2 had all been killed. There'd a lot of blood, but no pieces of flesh or bones. And there aren't any traces of bodies falling onto the grass. Group 2 managed to escape during the battle. There are many footprints here, but looking at the sizes, it seems there were only a couple of enemies who were searching this area when they were discovered. Sierra calmly nodded to Jin's observations. She was already tracing down Group 2's movements by examining the footprints and bloodstains. They seem to have gone west, young master. And there's a piece of bandage here. Bandage? Jin quickly joined Sierra's side and observed the strip of bandage. It was most definitely manufactured in Huphester. There was one attacker. He must have wounded Group 2 before escaping first. Group 2 seems to have stayed here for a moment in order to tend to their wounds, but had to escape as they predicted the attackers would return. Looking west, Jin would see a long path of grass being stepped on. Since there were no traces of horsehoof prints and only human footprints along with bloodstains, there was no reason for Jin to hesitate. Sierra, hide in this area and wait for Eddington and David to return. Then come rejoin us. We'll go after them, Belop. They were puffing and blowing as they ran at full speed. As none of them had slept a wink and spent the entire night running and searching, their stamina was nearing its limits. Belop was exhausted just from keeping up with Jin, but the latter wasn't too worried right now. As long as there were 5 or less 4-star warriors to face, Jin could easily deal with them all. In fact, the one thing that concerned him was how he'd use mana and spiritual power without the cadets noticing, but he didn't drown himself in those worries. He cared more about saving the cadets than keeping his secret hidden. Metallic sounds. The cadets are fighting people. Jin and Bellup's rush pursuit was fruitful. After around 30 minutes of chase, they could hear noises in the distance. Bellup also noticed the sounds. They both stopped on their tracks to find the source. Jin stopped his breath and scanned his surroundings, checking if any enemies had followed them as well. We will move undercover from now on, Bellup. But Group 2 is fighting the enemies right now, young master. We're in a forest right now. Instead of announcing our arrival to everyone, it's better to sneak behind the attackers and strike them in surprise. If there aren't many enemies, we can end this within a few seconds. As the two covertly traveled between the trees and approached the source of the noises, they could finally check on the cadets of Group 2. They were in the middle of combat in the center of the forest. None of them had received fatal wounds, such as amputations, but everyone had minor injuries, such as small cuts around their bodies. Scott Kiko Zhushun, where's Mesa? He could only see 3 cadets. T/N and PR/N. Hashtag Justice for Tamon. The masked enemies numbered 2. Seeing their movements, Jin came to the conclusion that they were indeed 4-star warriors. We'll strike them from behind simultaneously at my signal. I'll take the left, you take the right. Wait, no. Do you have a dagger with you? Bellup took out a dagger stored in his chest strap. Close your eyes. Why was Jin telling him to close his eyes in a situation like this? Bellup wasn't the type of person to ask himself such questions. If the young master ordered him to close his eyes, he would close his eyes. Once Bellup did so, Jin covered the dagger in spiritual energy. Spiritual power could enhance the cutting and destructive power of a weapon like aura. However, it had one more effect. When a weapon is covered in spiritual energy, the object's existence and presence thins out. Therefore, it could greatly increase the chances of success of a surprise attack, especially if one accurately threw the dagger without making a sound. Listen carefully, Bellup. As soon as I'm done talking, wait for 2 more seconds and go attack the enemy on the left. Swoosh! As soon as he finished whispering, Jin threw the darkened dagger. The blade cut the wind as it zoomed across the forest and lodged itself in the back of the rightmost enemy's head. Ugh! The attacker that was swinging his sword around immediately stopped moving. But before his ally on the left could even turn his head to check on him, Bellup ran up to him from behind and swung his sword down the surviving enemy's back. The assailant quickly noticed the attack and turned around to parry Bellup's sword, but had his Achilles tendon cut by Jin's follow-up surprise attack. Arg! Thud! Thump! Jin didn't reap the attacker's life immediately and strike the back of his head and his temple with the pommel of his sword. And as the enemy fell to the ground half unconscious, Jin pressed his knee onto his nape and completely suppressed him. Young master! The Group 2 cadets ran up to Jin. Their faces were painted with relief and hope for their survival, but was soon followed by the despair of having ruined the young master's very first mission. Is everyone all right? Do you know who sent this bastard? Jin slammed his fist down on the attacker's calf as he kept groaning and wheezing. He also put more strength in his knee to dunk the assailant's head in the mud. We're okay, but Mesa was captured by them. We have failed you, young master. Sigh. Jin exhaled deeply and grabbed the surviving assailant by the hair and removed his mask. It was the face of a 30-something-year-old man he had never seen before. The ones who failed are him and his boss. You guys take care of your injuries for now. Scott seems to have been wounded the most. Spare me. You want me to spare you? Jin couldn't help but let out a sarcastic chuckle at the assailant's words. Doesn't seem to be a Zipful follower since he cares for his life. Spare me aren't the first words a bold and reckless person would say after daring to attack Runcandel cadets. You should have said that before attacking my subordinates. You have 2 choices right now. Either you tell us your affiliation and why you attacked us along with where your headquarters are, and we'll kill you, and only you, painlessly. Smack, smack. Jin spoke as he slapped the assailant's cheeks from side to side. Or you keep your mouth shut, and the Runcandel clan will kill anyone and everyone related to you in the most painful manner that exists. Choose wisely. The attacker's eyes trembled as he listened to Jin's cold voice. You don't have a lot of time to think. Make a choice already. Will you really kill? Only me if I talk? I know that the revenge of the Runcandels is never this merciful. That's usually the case. But I am someone who keeps my promises. My name is Jin Runcandel. If you talk, your family and friends won't be put in harm's way. I put my honor and the clan's honor on the line. The attacker turned his gaze to observe the cadets. They simply stood quietly and nodded. I will talk. A wise choice. I am from a revolutionary group called Kinzalo. Kinzalo. As soon as he heard the name, Jin remembered an incident which created an uproar and shook the Zhan kingdom in his first life. It was a large-scale terror attack committed by the self-proclaimed revolutionary group Kinzalo. Kinzalo was different compared to the radical followers of the Zipful clan. The Zipful followers only targeted the Runcandels when performing terror attacks, but Kinzalo's area of activity was all around the world. They were crazy lunatics who believed that their king had to become the king of the world in order for their revolution to be complete. Kinzalo had ties with the Beastmen and caused so much chaos. They became famous for assassinating the king of Zhan and massacring so many civilians. However, Jin didn't know what happened to Kinzalo afterwards. He only knew that they were still active and thriving around the time he died. A revolutionary group. I see now. You planned on attacking Runcandel cadets, causing disorder in the Zhan kingdom, right? I'm only a low-ranked member, so I don't know that much. I also don't know the location of our headquarters, but the branch I was part of is located at the entrance of the Beastmen's territory. There are around 20 members in that branch. I see. I'll ask one last question. Why did you capture Mesa? The attacker shook his head and sighed. For propaganda. Apparently, the superiors ordered us to capture the female cadets alive if possible in order to use them for propaganda and publicity for the revolution. What a foul story. SCCRRT. Jin pulled Bradamani out of its scabbard, and the attacker closed his eyes. Thud. With this, I have kept my promise. A head fell to the ground, and Jin swung his sword one last time to remove the blood on his blade. The situation is dire. We don't have time to ask for reinforcements from the clan. I'll have to go on my own. Jin couldn't have predicted that they were dealing with a terrorist group from his past life, a group he had only heard about from rumors. Moreover, they weren't satisfied with just attacking the Runcandel cadets. They also planned on kidnapping the girls. How long has it been since Mesa was captured? It hasn't been an hour yet. Then they must still be on their way to the Beastmen's territory's entrance. Jin approached the dead body with the dagger in the head and pulled it out. He then received 2 more daggers from the cadets and stored them in his boots and inside his robe. We will also prepare to pursue them, young master. No, I'll go rescue Mesa on my own. You stay here and finish treating your wounds. Once you're done, reunite with Group 1 and request for assistance from the clan. Yes. The cadets all showed surprised expressions. The attackers we faced were all about 4-star warriors. How could we send you alone when there are 20 of them? You mustn't, young master. Please take us with you. Rescuing Mesa is important, but your safety is our utmost priority, young master. In fact, it's far too dangerous for you to pursue them. Let's return and ask for reinforcements from the clan together. The cadets all raised their voices in disapproval. According to the now-dead assailant, there were a total of 20 members in their branch. The cadets were right. Chasing them to rescue, Mesa was foolhardy, especially if he were to go alone. And he might have been lying when he said there were 20 of them. If we all die, including you, young master, the promise you made with him would be voided. Please make a careful judgment. Mesa is a comrade we all care about, but deaths happen regularly on missions. And if we immediately ask for reinforcement from the clan, she could be safely rescued. Scott. Yes, young master. As you say, deaths happen regularly on missions. But how can a legitimate Runcandel child sit by and not do anything when a cadet was captured? Jin calmly looked around, making eye contact with each cadet. I'm stronger than you all think I am. So stand up straight and follow my orders. Any other objections will be considered insubordination. The cadets all erased their distressed expressions. They couldn't say anything else due to Jin's powerful tone and gaze. I wait with impatience for all of you to grow stronger so that we can fight side by side in the future. I will get going now. Oh, and Bellop. Yes. Since everyone from Group 2 has been wounded, you are the strongest person after me now. Do you understand? You mustn't hesitate anymore. I shall bear that in mind. Now that all was said, Jin sprinted away, as time was of the utmost importance. All the cadets bowed in his direction until he was out of view. Currently, Jin has reached 3-star spiritual release, 3-star swordsmanship, and 4-star mana. Nobody would believe it if someone said these were the abilities and strengths of a 15-year-old boy. However, it was still reckless to face 24-star warriors simultaneously with these abilities. Furthermore, if the low-ranked lackeys were 4-star warriors, it was likely that the superiors were 5-star or stronger. However, Jin was confident enough to go face them all alone, as the enemies weren't aware of his spiritual power and magic. Moreover, although his swordsmanship was 3-star only, he had gained the knowledge of the secret tomes of countless martial clans. His chances of winning were not that low. I won't have to fight against 20 opponents at the same time. They've all scattered around, looking for the cadets, so I just need to deal with one small group at a time while searching for Mesa. Jin judged that there was enough distance between him and the cadets as he came to a halt. As he calmed his breath, Jin created a ball of mana on his right palm. He planned on using mana to search for the enemies. Seismic Sense. Seismic Sense was a 3-star earth magic spell. As its name implies, it is a spell that senses the state of the ground and is often used to detect earthquakes or other natural disasters. In other words, it wasn't the appropriate spell to use to track down enemies. However, depending on its application and links, magic has an infinite amount of possibilities and usages. Be that as it may, ordinary magicians require cooperation with another when trying to make use of the application and link tricks. Whoosh! As the ball of mana on Jin's right hand gradually permeated the ground, Jin created a second ball of mana on his left hand. This one was partially transparent as it was of the wind attribute. Multicasting. This was a skill that most magicians around the world could only dream of mastering. Without an aptitude for it, even 7-star magicians are unable to use this crucial skill. Jin could use multicasting since his past life, as soon as he became his magic teacher's pupil. Wind Pursuit. As he finished casting the second spell, wind began to gather around the transparent mana. After the wind blew around Jin for a few seconds, it detected the slight reaction from Seismic Sense and began flowing in that direction. The wind was following the information given to it by Seismic Sense. I'm lucky they're moving in the grasslands. If they were in the woods, it would have been hard to track them even with these 2 spells. If the members of Kinzalo had gone through the forest, the trees and life forms in there would have disturbed the detection, making it nigh impossible to find them. Jin canceled his magic. Multicasting consumed an extreme amount of mana, and if there was a magician amongst the enemies, they could find out that they were being pursued. They haven't gone very far. After running for around an hour, Jin could finally see physical traces of the terrorists around him, such as footprints or flattened grass. As he was about to start running again, Jin flinched and immediately stopped all movements. When he checked the footprints again, the number of pairs had gone down. Whoosh! An arrow came flying at him through the high grass. Jin effortlessly avoided it and aimed his sword in the direction it had come from. There was a ditch. The attackers had expected the cadets to follow them and had dug a hole in advance. As I thought, a Runcandel cadet. Your movements are good. I can see why Chaff had such a hard time earlier. The kid dodged the arrow, Clark. Give me a gold coin. 3 men wearing masks came out of the burrow and giggled amongst themselves. It seemed they had made a bet when they saw Jin, whether he would be able to avoid the surprise attack or not. The man they called Clark took out a gold coin and tossed it. You made money thanks to that fucking brat. Good for you. The winner of the bet caught the coin and smirked as he took out his sword. Jin was still silently observing his opponents. They were composed of 1 magician and 2 warriors. Their aura and mana aren't that strong. They must all be around the 4-star stage. While Jin carefully judged his enemy's strengths, the people in question thought the boy was frozen in fear. Don't worry too much, kid. I don't have a habit of torturing people to death on purpose. We'll end this ASAP. But why is he alone? Where are all the other brats? They must have all been killed by Chaff and Greg. Kekek. About this Chaff and Greg. Does one have a scar on his left cheek? And is the other bald? When Jin spoke up for the first time, two of the men burst out in laughter. Wahaha, scar on his cheek, bald. It's going to be hilarious when we tell them about this. Ha ha ha. However, one of them wasn't laughing. The magician. You. How do you know about Chaff and Greg's appearances? Isn't it obvious? I took off their masks to check after killing them. They were fighting against my subordinates, you know? The glee in their eyes immediately disappeared. Jin was still holding his sword casually with an indifferent expression. Stop bluffing. Those two are 4-star knights. They're not people some Runcandel beginner-class cadets can defeat. Do you guys actually call assholes who gang up on kids knights in Kinslow? Your group seems vastly different compared to the Runcandel clan. Clark Mills. Check our surroundings. It seems there weren't just children on this mission. This brat isn't a cadet. There must be a guardian knight somewhere. The men didn't seem to think that Jin could have killed Chaff and Greg. Even if he was a pure-blooded Runcandel, they couldn't imagine that a child who had yet to fully develop had killed 2 4-star knights. Thus, the three of them immediately steeled themselves. Death could arrive at any moment for them. Before joining Kinslow, they were either mercenaries or knights. And during those days, they had heard plenty about the strength of Runcandel guardian knights. Haha, Jin let out a chuckle. Even though you guys fear the Runcandels, you didn't think twice about attacking our cadets? There are no guardian knights here. I came alone. Bullshit. If I had a guardian knight with me, you guys wouldn't have been able to chat leisurely like this. And if I had one with me, where could they be hiding in these plains? Also, there's no way our knights would need to hide in front of 3 baboons like you. The nervous men controlled their breaths as they observed their surroundings. Jin's words weren't wrong. There was nowhere to hide in this open area. And so, the men returned to their threatening and arrogant attitude. They were embarrassed and felt humiliated for being afraid of a kid like Jin, a brat who seemed 20 years younger than them. You really came alone? I thought you were an arrogant kid who trusted his clan's knights, but you're just an ignorant brat who doesn't know when to fear for his life. You think so? It would have been better for you guys. Before letting Jin finish, Clark dashed to him and swung his sword at the boy's neck. If I were merely an arrogant kid who trusted his clan's knights. Clark suddenly fell flat on his face with a groan, even though he was just about to kill Jin. One of his legs had been cleanly sliced off without warning. Good thing I bought time. The cause of Clark's amputation was a spell called Windblade. It was one of the hardest spells to use amongst the 4-star wind magic spells. Jin had secretly prepared the spell while chatting with them. Clark, what kind of Runcandel uses magic? The magician began to cast a spell to counterattack while Mills sprinted towards Jin in a fury as he wielded his sword. You bastard! Clang! Jin took a stance as he parried Mills' downward swing. The aura-covered attack felt heavy to Jin due to his immature body. Nevertheless, a single 4-star knight was no problem for him. As Jin pivoted and aimed for Mills' flank with his sword, the magician yelled, "Mills, fall back!" Whoosh! A huge flame had formed on the magician's palm. He then launched his spell, swinging his arm, and the flame streaked towards the boy like a rope. A 4-star fire spell, Flame Whip. It was the strongest spell the Kinslow magician could cast right now. Jin didn't avoid the attack and received it with his body. The corner of the magician's lips rose as he saw his spell hit. Jin then used the fact that his body was hidden by the flames to stab Mills in the neck with Bradamanti. SLRRT. With a blade in his neck, Mills couldn't even cry out in pain and fell into death's embrace. The magician stepped back in shock as he couldn't believe his eyes. The final member, Clark, was still on the floor, crying in pain as he held his stump of a leg. Jin grabbed the flame whip clinging to his robe with his hand and extinguished it. Sparks scattered around as the mana in the spell disappeared in the wind like ashes. As he had fully absorbed the Phoenix Heart, all fire spells of 6-star or lower rank couldn't inflict damage on Jin anymore. Blast it! The magician began casting a new spell when he realized Jin had high resistance against fire magic. Icicle Shot, the same spell that had attacked Jin's carriage on his way to the Garden of Swords. Don't approach me. The icicle shot flew towards Jin, but this time it broke apart and fell to the ground before even reaching him. Beast King Orgul's Pendant. The artifact's mana had protected Jin. Penetrating the pendant's mana with spells of 5-star or lower was going to be difficult for the magician. Hey Chow, you whack. Bradamante drew a parabola as it slashed the magician in the waist. When Jin twisted the blade inside the man's body, the trembling magician bit the dust. I have a nice sister, that's how. After finishing off Clark, who was going into shock, Jin began running across the grasslands again. Obviously, he made sure to disguise Clark's injury as a sword cut instead of a magic attack before leaving. They weren't lying in ambush for long. The ones who captured Mesa aren't far from here. Jin's entire body was soaking in sweat as he ran across the plains. Since yesterday morning to now, he had been awake for over 24 hours searching for clues and pursuing the enemies. And since he had also engaged them in combat, his stamina was starting to reach its limits. In fact, the use of multicasting and Windblade were the decisive factors behind his stamina's depletion. There were still 15 enemies left. In the worst-case scenario, he would have to face them all simultaneously, but if he is lucky, he would face them in small groups of 2 or 3. Having a child's body is such a pain. I'm still too young. If I had my past life's combat abilities, I could have easily decimated those morons from earlier without having to strategize everything. During his chase, Jin realized that the attackers from Kinzalo were all shabby and unskilled. They were all ex-mercenaries or knights, but it bugged Jin how they didn't even bother erasing their tracks while moving. It's probably because they're underestimating us. Jin was on point. Kinzalo was looking down on the Runcandel cadets. While the cadets were part of the Runcandel clan, they were all rookies who had yet to experience a real battlefield in their lives. Kinzalo's lack of caution was also evident in how they only left behind 2 members to finish off Group 2 after they captured Mesa. They had also placed just 1 magician and 2 warriors in that ditch to deal with potential survivors and pursuers. Keep underestimating us. I'll make sure you regret it later, though. Jin's greatest weapon right now was the fact that they were underestimating him. That was why he wasn't afraid of facing them all in battle despite his low stamina. He ran for another hour. This time, he was keeping an eye out for ambushes, but the footprints remained unchanged. In fact, he could now see the wheel tracks of a carriage in addition. Jin stopped for a moment in order to inspect those tracks. The ones who captured Mesa reunited with another group here. They probably locked her in the carriage. Now that a carriage was involved, it would be much easier for Jin to catch up to them. The ground was uneven due to the sleet from the previous night, so they wouldn't be able to advance quickly. As he followed the wheel tracks for a while, Jin came across an unknown path that continued into a forest. It was a road that led to the beastman's territory. After recollecting himself and his breath, Jin entered the forest. The wheel tracks continued along the unique path into the depth of the trees. Well then, how should I plan it out? Jin was in the middle of the cadet rescue operation. An unexpected situation had arisen during their mission, so his current operation had changed from scouting to rescuing. The search mission for the Tycoon's missing son wasn't the priority anymore. In that case, what was the most important aspect of a rescue mission? The answer was obvious: the protection and safety of the target. Killing all my enemies isn't the priority. I need to make sure Mesa doesn't get hurt. Currently, 3 hours have passed since Mesa's kidnapping. 3 hours. Too much time had passed. The dishonorable and immoral kidnappers could have started using Mesa as a plaything during this time span. However, Jin still believed that Mesa was safe. If they were humiliating Mesa, Jin would have caught up to them already. The only information about Kinzalo Jin had was from the newspapers in his past life. They were a criminal armed group of radicals who followed a strict hierarchy on the inside. That was how Jin viewed Kinzalo. A strict hierarchy. That was the aspect Jin was focusing on. It was highly likely that Kinzalo's members enjoyed their spoils of war in an order of privilege amongst them, and hence Jin believed Mesa was still safe. I should reach their branch headquarters soon if I continue along this path. And it hasn't been long since Mesa and her kidnappers arrived there. About 30 minutes ago? 1 hour? It was probably something between that. The kidnappers were most likely handing Mesa over to their superiors right now. Therefore, this was the last chance he could rescue Mesa safely. Every minute, every second was crucial now. Thus, he had to attack them head-on in order to save time. However, if he did such a frontal assault at their branch headquarters, several problems would arise. If all the surviving members of the group were gathered there, Jin would have to face dozens of enemies on his own. And even if he could kill them all, they would probably use Mesa as a hostage. After thinking for a few seconds, Jin nodded to himself. First, I need to create confusion and chaos amongst them, so that they wouldn't even think of using Mesa. Fortunately, we're inside a forest right now. 2 balls of crimson mana formed on Jin's hands. They were the same spell the enemy magician had used earlier, the 4-star fire spell, Flame Whip. Good thing I reached 4-star in magic before this mission. It would have been difficult to burn down a damp forest with just the firepower of a 3-star magician. Whoosh! Jin swung his 2 flame whips in all 4 directions. The spell has decent firepower, but its real advantage is that once it hits a target, it doesn't get detached so easily from it. In other words, there is no better spell than this to burn down a drenched forest. Jin cast the same spells over and over again. Magical arson was a serious felony in this world. However, such restrictions didn't matter to Jin Runcandel. Once the area was ablaze, Jin then conjured wind mana. Wind Wave, another 4-star spell. Once he finished casting it, a bluish wind filled with mana began blowing the blaze forward. Just like the name implied, it was a spell that created a huge gust of wind that undulated forward like a wave. The blaze encroached onto the forest. Initially, it was unable to burn the damp trees, but once the flames grew large enough, it began swallowing everything in its path, wet or not. And so, Jin advanced through the forest as he burned it down. He concealed his body behind the flames, taking advantage of his resistance provided by the Phoenix Heart. His mana had greatly diminished due to blindly casting 4-star spells, but his plan was extremely successful. Now, he could see a building in the distance. It was Kinzelo's branch headquarters. People were exiting the building in panic one by one. Fire. The forest is burning. Report to the captain, and gather the magicians. Water. We need water. Why is there fire? Kinzelo's members were running around chaotically. As the fire hadn't reached the headquarters yet, they planned on extinguishing it beforehand. I don't know who their leader is, but he's probably not crazy enough to enjoy the spoils of war during a forest fire. Now, he just had to kill them one by one and rescue Mesa. Jin removed the 2 daggers in his boots and covered them in spiritual energy. In the meantime, Kinzelo had no idea someone was aiming for their lives. People usually can't think rationally while in a state of panic during a sudden disaster. If there were a single cool-headed individual amongst them, they would have realized this forest fire was created artificially. However, the warriors were hastily pouring water on the fire, whereas the magicians were busy casting water or ice spells. Jin easily managed to get near them as he was hidden amongst the flames. Swoosh! A shadowy dagger flew and stabbed a magician in the neck. The victim let out a yelp, but it was camouflaged by the sound of crackling branches and the panicked shouts of the others. That's 1 down. Jin threw the corpse into the blaze and set his eyes on his next prey, an out-of-breath warrior holding buckets of water. He perished the same way as the magician. Detecting the dark blade flying through the flames was difficult for mere 4-star warriors. Jin retrieved one of the daggers he threw. Including the one in his robe, he still had 2 remaining. It would be so satisfying if I killed them all like this, but even these morons would notice something if people keep disappearing like this. Jin lowered himself and observed the situation amongst the enemies. A man who appeared higher ranked than the others seemed to have noticed something. He began leading the others and giving out orders. I should kill him first. As the man yelled something that was inaudible to Jin, The men around him all took out their weapons. They then scattered around the building. He had 2 magicians and warriors stay to put out the fire, and had the others stay on alert around the building. Not a bad decision. Well, it would have been a great decision if Jin weren't within the fire. Jin flew towards the commander, who was left alone, like a whistling arrow. He hadn't removed Bradamante from its scabbard yet on purpose. The metallic sound and Bradamante's white blade would have ruined his surprise attack. Streak. As Jin suddenly appeared from within the fire, the commander swung his sword around in shock and panic. The boy bent down to avoid the blade, but he couldn't dodge the kick that followed. Bam! As Jin rolled on the ground, the man continued his flurry of attacks. You're at. So you're the one who set the forest on fire. Stab. Slash. The man kept aiming for the boy on the ground, and Jin rolled his body to avoid the attacks without a moment to rest. The man then threw his sword away and jumped onto Jin, seizing him. You fucking brat. I'll definitely kill Y. But Jin had allowed himself to get captured on purpose. He had also initiated this hand-to-hand fight on purpose by leaving Bradamante sheathed. Despite the man's entire body weight pushing down on Jin's body, he wriggled around like a flexible snake. Before the man could realize what was happening, Jin had already snapped his neck after deforming his body into an unnatural position. Crack! With the sound of the neck bones snapping, the man flopped onto the ground as saliva dripped out of his mouth. It was my first time using the Meyer-style martial arts. Fuck, it hurts. Jin could only deform his body beyond its limits to kill the man, thanks to the Meyer clan's martial arts. He dislocated his own shoulder in mere instants and passed his legs in between their bodies to twist the enemy's neck. It was one of the techniques written in the Meyer clan's secret tomes, the Revenant's assassination. He had killed the man who appeared to be the leader. All he had to do now was deal with the underlings who were mindlessly running around the blaze and the morons who were nervously guarding the building's surroundings. After fixing his shoulder, Jin set his gaze on Kinzelo's branch headquarters. The old stone building was slightly smaller than the residence of middle-class nobles. Jin speculated that there weren't many enemies left inside. He also had all the keys. After going through the leader-like man's corpse, Jin found a keyring and some gold coins. He threw the body and the coins into the fire and approached the building's front gate. Kriawak. As he opened the rusty iron door, the first thing he saw were candles. And on the walls were bizarre drawings he couldn't understand the meaning behind. They were Kinzelo's symbols. What an unpleasant bunch of people. He stuck to the wall and walked down the corridor. Not long after, Jin realized that he couldn't sense anyone in the area. At the very least, there wasn't anyone on his floor. And after using the keys to open every room he came across, there was a single key left untouched. Is it a key that leads to the basement? As the building structure was fairly simple, Jin quickly found the entrance to the basement. The remaining key fit perfectly inside the keyhole. Once he descended the stairs, he saw Mesa chained to the wall. Mesa! As soon as he saw her, Jin felt relieved. She hadn't experienced anything concerning yet. She was still wearing the cadet's uniform. However, her face was bruised all over from being seemingly beaten. Clang! Clang! Jin imbued aura into Bradamante and cut the chains tying her against the wall. It's dangerous, young master. Why are you? When he heard the very first word she spoke to him, Jin couldn't help but clench his fist and grind his teeth. This isn't the moment to worry about me. Mesa Milcano, can you walk? I don't think I can run. I see. For now, I'll support you. So let's. Boom. The two of them flinched and raised their heads. With that sudden explosive sound, the entire building began trembling. Shit, what's going on now? After propping one of Mesa's arms over his shoulders, Jin was about to get up. Boom, boom. But due to the sudden explosions, they had to stay crouching. The Kinzelo branch headquarters shook as if it were about to collapse on itself. An earthquake? Or did someone upstairs accidentally blow up some explosives? Jin stared at the ceiling and sharpened his senses. He had a bad feeling, but kept his composure. Young master, please escape first. Silence, Mesa. Please promise me one thing. Mesa spoke as she stared directly into Jin's eyes. If we're confronted with a life-threatening situation, you must abandon me. You cannot lay down your life here. Jin nodded silently. But that didn't mean he agreed with Mesa. If he actually agreed with her, he wouldn't have come to rescue her on his own in the first place. However, he judged that pretending to agree with her was the best way to calm her down in this situation. We need to figure out what's happening up there first. Could it be magicians attacking the building? It feels like it'll collapse at any moment. The magicians here don't have this much power. The reverberations and explosions continued throughout their conversation. We're going up. Unfortunately, I won't be able to support you. Concentrate and stay right behind me. The two of them sneaked up the stairs. The impacts were happening on the outside, but the walls inside the building already had fissures and cracks all over them. The murals with Kinzalo's symbols were destroyed as pieces fell to the floor. However, oddly enough, despite the critical situation on the inside, not a single member of Kinzalo had entered to check up on the building. They're either still outside trying to figure out what's happening, or they're already dead. Jin exited the headquarters accompanied by Mesa. Once they were outside, he finally understood what was going on. It was the latter. When he opened the iron gates, he was greeted by the corpses of the Kinzalo members. They appeared to have been slashed by large claws, as their bodies were covered in scratches and lacerations. They were killed while trying to return to the building. And this is the work of beastmen. They ended up encountering the one group of foes he wanted to see the least. Jin felt a bitter taste in his mouth. The outside was synonymous to hell. The blaze Jin had caused had already reached the building, and the small paths that weren't burning between the flames were covered in corpses in hideous states. Mesa. Yes, it's the beastmen. Looking at the corpses, it's a tribe that fights with their claws. Shush, don't say anything. Follow that path and keep walking. I'm sure you can avoid the flames yours, shit. Having stopped midway through his sentence, Jin unsheathed Bradamani and raised it. Something was slowly walking out of the inferno, not too far from them. His fur was far too white to belong to someone who had just stepped out of the fire behind them. A height that exceeded 2 meters and eyes that shone blue. The White Wolf tribe. Their opponent held an enormous hammer in his right hand, and that weapon was the cause of the tremors so far that shook the entire building. With his Herculean strength, a characteristic that belonged to their tribe specializing in combat, he had smashed the hammer around the building the entire time, as if to get some cornered mice to reveal themselves. I was wondering who subdued these pieces of shit, but it's just a kid. Their opponent stopped on his tracks and began swinging his hammer. Meanwhile, Mesa was struck with fear, not because of her impending death, but because of the young masters. Young master, it's the White Wolf tribe. I will buy you some time. Please keep your promise. Jin exhaled deeply. He then turned around and karate-chopped Mesa in the back of the neck. Her trembling body flopped as she fell unconscious before she could say anything else. The beastman shrugged and grinned as if they found the situation amusing. Geez, what a tearful scene. Such a shame I'm the only one here to see it. Is this, that thing you humans talk about? That thing, all right. Love? Are you two lovers? He spoke like some crude, backstreet gangster, but the White Wolf tribe couldn't be compared to such weaklings. When compared to a knight, White Wolf beastmen were at least 6-star, and that was for your average adult beastman. In other words, they were a race born and raised solely for combat. Therefore, if Jin faced him in battle right now, his chances of survival were close to 0. I am Jin Runcandel, legitimate son of Siren Runcandel. Reveal your name, beastman. Runcandel? The smile on the beastman's face vanished. In these situations, there are only 2 reasons why an individual's smile disappears after hearing the Runcandel name. Either they fear the Runcandels. Looks like among the prey I've killed so far in life, today's prey takes the win as the most pricey one. Come to think of it, your robes do have the black sword on it. My name is Quasito Truca, warrior of the Truca tribe, or they loathe the Runcandels. In the White Wolf Beastman's case is the latter. Back in the day, it was the Runcandel clan's first patriarch who killed Javier, a White Wolf Beastman the tribe worshipped as a god. Today I will offer you to Javier at the altar to soothe his grudge and sorrows. Jin Runcandel, make a choice. Will you have an honorable duel with me, or will you attempt to run away like a coward before being torn to thousands of pieces? Jin imbued aura into his sword. I shall have an honorable duel. Jin made that decision after taking the White Wolf Beastman's characteristics into account. Generally, they considered humans as mere praise or toys they could mess around with. They never showed honor or dignity and cruelly killed their prey. However, there are specific situations in which they put their honor on the line to battle the enemy. It happens when they consider their enemy to be strong enough, or when they're a Runcandel. In these cases, they attempt to have an honorable duel with their opponent. They will put aside all underhanded methods and face their adversary with respect. Since those who die through this duel don't experience unfairness or corruption, they could be offered to Javier at the altar. Quasito Truca, I would like to make a suggestion before the duel begins. Speak, little Runcandel. During the duel, you cannot harm the unconscious human behind me. Quasito nodded in agreement. All right, but if I win, that lass is mine to kill as well. Understood. Jin moved to the empty area in front of the building. By doing that, he walked past Quasito. Nevertheless, the Beastman didn't attack the boy who had shown his back to him. It was due to the White Wolf tribe's laws about honor and duels. This seems like a good place. That way, you can keep your promise during the duel. Good idea. It seems you're knowledgeable about our laws. But keep this in mind, little Runcandel. If you take advantage of our laws to double-cross me, you'll tear me to pieces, whether or not that corrupts me. I don't plan on doing that. Kohaha. It seems there are some honorable humans, even among the Runcandels. Jin smiled as he listened to the Beastman's words. This Quasito seemed to have met a Runcandel for the first time ever. If he had encountered one of Jin's siblings instead of himself, there was no way he would have survived and talked for so long like this. Jin and Quasito faced each other with around 10 steps between them. Let's begin. Quasito lifted his hammer and took a stance. He planned on making the first move. Swoosh. Quasito darted forward as he wielded his hammer. He was unbelievably fast that no one would think his speed came from someone with over 200 kilograms of pure muscle mass. Jin avoided the blow by stepping backwards with skilled footwork and thrusted Bradamani towards the Beastman's chest. However, a White Wolf Beastman wasn't about to get injured from Jin's swordsmanship. Quasito adeptly changed his attack patterns as he overwhelmed the boy. Jin could only helplessly get pushed around by the giant enemy. Clang! During these few seconds of exchange, their weapons only made contact once. But that single blow was enough to make Jin feel like his wrists were about to fall off. No, it wasn't just his wrists. His entire body was stinging and in pain from his head to the tip of his toes. Jin judged that he could only parry 10 blows from this beast at most before his body collapsed. I'll only get one chance. If he had no chances at winning at all, Jin would have immediately broken Orgel's pendant to summon Luna. And if his eldest sister were here, a weakling like Quasito wouldn't have lasted a single second against her. But this crisis wasn't life-threatening enough that he'd break the pendant. Moreover, if he couldn't overcome a simple crisis like this, he wouldn't have the right or qualification to become the world's most powerful magic swordsman in the future. All the powerful and mighty individuals Jin knew overcame deadly crises in their lives and became symbols of strength. In cases like this, having a weapon that the opponent wasn't aware of was always an advantage. There were two crucial things Quasito didn't know about Jin. The fact that he could use both spiritual power and magic. I can't use magic, though. Magic was out of the question. If he missed the opportunity and failed to kill Quasito, he would have to break the pendant to summon Luna. If Luna noticed the traces of magic and Quasito blabbed about it, Jin's life would take a turn for the worse. Furthermore, 4-star magic spells wouldn't be strong enough to pierce through the White Wolf Beastman's thick coat. In other words, he only had one choice: spiritual power. And Jin had already made up his mind on how to use it to overpower his opponent. I'll awaken the sword. Awakening Bradamani. The exclusive function that was only available to a contractor that controlled spiritual energy. The function Murakin told Jin not to dream of using until he reached 5-star in spiritual release. The day Jin received the sword from Luna, he actually attempted to awaken Bradamani that evening. When he awakened the sword, Jin felt a surge of power overflowing within and coiling around him. However, Murakin intervened and pummeled him, so Jin couldn't complete the awakening. Are you trying to kill yourself, Jin Runcandel? You're the unique contractor. If something happens to you... That was the first time Jin saw Murakin get genuinely angry and furiously yell like that. In order to make up for that, Jin had to buy countless types of erotic magazines for the perverted dragon. And now, Jin was waiting for an opportunity to experience that surge of power again. Slam! Jin groaned loudly as he blocked a heavy blow from Quasito's hammer. Despite Bradamani's perfect shielding, the boy's body was nearing its breaking point. That's a good sword, little Runcandel. It doesn't have a single nick even after receiving my hammer's attacks. Thanks for the compliment, but it doesn't match well with your symbol, the black sword. It's too white and dazzling. Clang! Another blow came at him. This time, Jin was sent flying all the way to the Kinzalo building's wall. Slam! Feeling the hard stone wall on his back, Jin felt like his skull and spine would shatter. But he somehow managed to hold onto his consciousness and stay awake. Huh. Cough. Huh. As he panted while coughing up blood, Jin could see 2 Quasitos approaching him, his vision doubling due to the concussion. It's over now. I'll offer that sword along with you to Javier. That was a good duel. Quasito raised his hammer up high. If that boulder-esque weapon fell on Jin, he would perish without a doubt. Farewell. The moment he was about to deal the finishing blow, Quasito felt his vision suddenly go dark. It was only for an instant, but for some reason, he felt like several hours had gone by. Quasito couldn't swing the hammer. Time had stopped momentarily for him. When he regained consciousness and looked down, his now clear eyes saw a black blade impaling his body. A black blade that seemed to have been dyed by the shadows within the darkness. And on the other end of the sword was Jin, whose hair was swaying in the air like a blazing fire being fueled by a warm wind. Just fun. I didn't know why a black sword was the clan's emblem either until recently. Quasito coughed, and red blood splattered on the ground. But suddenly, Jin let out a horrible shriek. Once he calmed down, he spoke in a voice that was completely different than usual. A coarse, rough, and unsettling voice. That was a good duel. Shira'ea, the dead Quasito's shadow. Mesa's shadow in the distance. The shadows of the burning trees. They all flew towards Jin before getting absorbed by him. The shadows moved as if they were avoiding the light and taking cover inside the boy. Fortunately, Jin successfully awakened Bradamani. Unfortunately, as all the shadows in the area were sucked into him, Jin felt the searing pain of his body tearing into thousands of pieces. His mouth was screaming on its own volition, and his limbs were subconsciously twisting around. Whether he opened or closed his eyes, he still saw the same muddled and dizzying darkness. Jin wondered whether this was going to be the end of him. It was a miracle he hadn't fainted yet. Jin realized this was the spiritual energy congestion Murakin had warned him about. When the boy first attempted to awaken Bradamante, and Murakin became infuriated, the dragon later sat down and calmly explained the dangers of the sword. When individuals with insufficient spiritual energy try to awaken the sword recklessly, they pay the price for it. If one experiences spiritual energy congestion, 9 in 10 people immediately perish. It wasn't as if Jin had forgotten about the energy congestion when awakening Bradamante during the fight. He simply didn't have any other solution to win and survive other than Orgel's pendant. But Jin didn't want to break it yet, as it could only be used once in his lifetime. The sudden mission issued to the beginner class cadets. The appearance of Kinzalo and a white wolf beastman. Jin believed that while Siren hadn't predicted Mesa's kidnapping, his father had planned for this unexpected incident to occur to examine Jin's handling of the situation. This mission wasn't to test the cadets. Its true objective was to evaluate Jin, and Jin only. If I had used the pendant to survive the life-threatening situation, father would have given me the worst possible score. Jin's father, Jin Runcandel, was an extremely cold-hearted person. The patriarch was only showing interest in Jin because the boy was connected to Solderet and because of his prominent results and skills in class. However, if Jin disappointed his father a single time, Jin would ruthlessly abandon all hopes and interests in his youngest son immediately. In truth, Jin was hoping for that to happen. As long as Jiren's interest in him persisted, the boy would have a harder time to act covertly and train his magic. Jin didn't really hold any attachments towards the clan and his reputation in the first place. However, today wasn't the right day to disappoint his father. Jin still had a lot to learn and receive from the Runcandel clan. Ark. Jin cried out in agony again as he bent his back on the wrong side. Each time a shadow got absorbed in his body, Jin thought that death wouldn't be a bad solution to escape this pain. If there truly were punishments waiting for sinners in hell, would it feel like this? The boy was experiencing the sensation of being burned alive as well as having his organs frozen at the same time. I can't lose consciousness. If I do, it's over for me. Stay focused. He had never experienced such pain, even in his first life. The suffering wasn't as bad as this back when his teacher struck lightning at him for several hours to make him understand the essence behind lightning magic. Jin had no idea whether time was flowing or not. He wasn't sure whether a couple of minutes or several hours had passed since the agony began. He couldn't resist this forever. Jin had to do something in order to overcome this crisis. And the answer to this something was obvious. Spiritual release. The boy barely managed to sit cross-legged on the ground and began gathering the spiritual energy inside his body to one location. Dark red blood poured out between his trembling lips, and his eyes had completely rolled back, unable to return to their original positions. He constantly coughed and gasped for air. Jin could feel that he was walking on a thin line between life and death right now. However, he couldn't control the violent and chaotic spiritual energy inside him merely with 3-star spiritual release, a stage he had just recently reached. Having started the spiritual release, Jin spat out a clot of dark blood and fell forward. Again. Keep your cool. A strong dizziness took over him as he began to hear auditory hallucinations. Most of the hallucinations were related to the events in Jin's past life. Stuff like, "You're the disgrace of the clan," or "a failure like you shouldn't have been born in our clan." Those kinds of auditory hallucinations kept constantly bothering him. However, such words and slander had no effect on the current Jin. He completely ignored what his ears were telling him and concentrated on the spiritual energy inside him. Hot energy on one side, cold energy on the other. Jin instinctively separated the spiritual energy inside his body to the right and left according to their properties, as if he were sorting out pebbles on the ground according to their colors. The violent pain rooted in his brain slowly started to dissipate. His eyes rolled back to their normal positions and light returned to his vision. Jin's intuition was telling him that he was about to successfully gain control over the spiritual energy congestion inside him. As the agony diminished, Jin slowly inspected his surroundings. The shadows Jin had absorbed had returned to their original positions. However, unlike what Murakin had shown him in the Storm Castle's underground chamber, the objects that had their shadows stolen from them didn't get damaged or broken. The more the pain disappeared, the better Jin could think with a clear mind. Soon enough, Jin fully separated the 2 types of spiritual energy remaining inside him. His surroundings regained their original colors. The blaze died down under the influence of the spiritual energy, and the burnt forest smelled of ashes. Phew! As he exhaled deeply, the disciplined spiritual energy came to a standstill. The energy no longer harmed Jin in any way. Did it work? The pain disappeared unnaturally quickly that it's making me nervous now. Jin stood up and started stretching his body. He felt nothing out of place. In fact, everything was as usual. However, the one difference compared to before was the abundant spiritual energy inside him. It felt like it was about to leak even if Jin stood still, doing nothing. In any case, I don't think I'll have any problems moving around now. I should quickly head back with Mesa. Mesa was still unconscious in front of the Kinzalo building. In other words, not much time had passed since the beginning of his battle against Quasito. As he passed Mesa's arms over his shoulders, Jin suddenly turned around to face the building again. Who's there? He had detected someone. Someone was walking down the corridor inside the building towards the front door. However, unlike the Kinzalo members he had fought against earlier, this person didn't feel like a trained fighter. The unknown individual was walking carelessly as Jin heard their ragged breath. Please save me. As Jin ripped the door open, he saw a terrified young man raise both his hands in defense. He looked delicate and weak, as if he hadn't faced any hardships in life. Jin couldn't help but tilt his head in confusion. Who are you? Another Kinzalo member? No, absolutely not. I am Sember Bill, from the Bill clan of the Zhan Kingdom. Ah, so it's you. I almost missed you. Nice to meet you. Jin grinned as he spoke. Sember Bill. He was the heir of the Bill merchant clan of the Zhan Kingdom. He was the missing individual the cadets were searching for. Why you are? Jin Runcandel. I was looking for you after receiving a request from your father. Runcandel? Thank the heavens. As soon as Sember heard Jin's name, his eyes began to glisten in tears. You have saved my life. I, Sember Bill, will never forget this favor, Lord Jin. Thank you very much. As he received the heartfelt gratitude, Jin could only stand awkwardly and feel guilty. Ever since the Kinzalo members had attacked the cadets, he had completely forgotten about Sember's existence and their mission to search for him. There's no favor to repay. We received this mission after being remunerated. Now stop crying. It's time to go home. Sob, sob. Sniff. Yes. And so, Jin and Sember left the Ashen Forest as the former carried Mesa on his back. Sember only recovered his senses a while after they had left the forest. Come to think of it, how did you get captured by them, Sember? We only heard that you had disappeared in this area. If it's difficult to talk about, you don't have to. Not at all. In truth, it was because of my lover. But I'm not sure whether Lord Jin will believe me. Why wouldn't I believe you? Did you elope with her or something? No. I came to the southern border because I was following my lover, who passed away 2 years ago. Jin stopped nodding along and froze in his footsteps. You followed your deceased lover here? What do you mean? Had he lost his mind from the shock of being kidnapped? Jin thought to himself as he observed Sember's gaze. However, his eyes seemed clear and alive. I'm also wondering whether I saw a ghost or not. But it was definitely her. She had the exact same face and also had the 2 moles on her wrist. She gave me a note that told me to come here. And you know what happened afterwards. Sember awkwardly turned to Jin. Haha, as I thought, you don't believe me. I'm also not sure whether I should tell my clansmen about this or not once I'm home. No, keep talking. The woman who gave you the note. Was it really your lover? That's what I've been saying. There's no way I wouldn't recognize her. Her face, voice, her gaze as she looked at me. Everything was exactly the same as before. At those words, Jin thought of a single name. Bouvard Gaston. This seems to be that transformation master's handiwork. The transformation crimes. A series of uncommon crimes that shook the world in his past life. When the Vermont Empire's special forces revealed Bouvard Gaston's crimes to the public after capturing him, a majority of them were kidnapping cases. And there was only one reason why he would kidnap a rich tycoon's son. He was planning on demanding a ransom. What is the relation between Bouvard and Kinzalo? Jin couldn't find the answer to that right now. The boy decided that it was about time he went to find Bouvard himself. Ever since the Zipful followers tried to kidnap Jin when he left the Storm Castle, he and Bouvard were fated to meet one day. However, Jin hadn't gone to find the criminal until now, as he was still growing and had no opportunities. The fragmented workshop he manages is located in the Curano Dukedom's capital. I should find an opportunity to go see him while I'm in the intermediate training class. Jin felt a sense of incongruity whenever he thought of Bouvard. If the criminal was truly connected to Kinzalo and the radical Zipful followers, Jin couldn't recklessly stir trouble with Bouvard, as the backlash would be immense. I need to meet him face to face and find out what kind of person he is. It would also be a good idea to obtain more information about him that wasn't written in the newspapers in my past life. Having finished recounting his story, Sember smiled bashfully. Thank you for taking me seriously, Lord Jin. In truth, I thought no one would believe me if I went back home, which was giving me a heavy heart. But seeing you listen earnestly is a breath of fresh air. That's a relief to know. After walking for another 2 hours, Jin took out a flare from his chest pocket and shot it in the sky. The main house must have sent some reinforcements by now. Let's wait for them to arrive here. Huh? Lord Jin, did you actually call for Runcandel Guardian Knights just to rescue me? Sember was moved by Jin's sincerity and appeared as if he would willingly pay several golden crowns to Jin if the latter asked for it. Jin didn't have the heart to say that it was all for Mesa, so he only nodded awkwardly. Ignorance is bliss. I will never forget today, Lord Jin. If you ever need my help in some way, please don't hesitate to come to me. Sember Bill spoke as he extended his hand. Jin didn't think the Runcandels would ever need the help of a mere clan of merchants. But again, he didn't say that out loud. Jin replied positively as he shook Sember's hand. As soon as the beginner class cadets finished reporting the results of their mission, chaos descended upon the Garden of Swords. As Garen announced the mission's flawless completion to Rosa, she wore a satisfied smile. The other Runcandels who were waiting at the main house couldn't hide their shock and disbelief. What? Jin fought against a white wolf warrior beastman and won. Impossible. Must have been some bandit wearing wolf fur or something. How could a brat who just became a 3-star knight kill a white wolf beastman? The fourth daughter, Mew Runcandel, and fifth daughter, and Runcandel were chatting amongst themselves. They were respectively 10 and 9 years older than Jin, and were both currently 7-star knights. A powerful white wolf warrior beastman would be a difficult opponent even for knights who recently reached the 7-star stage. It was to no surprise that Mew and couldn't believe Jin's achievement. Even if the youngest faced a beastman that was extremely weak compared to their tribe's average, a 3-star still can't defeat a white wolf beastman. Yeah. But are you telling me Mother seriously believed what the report said? The two disgruntled ladies shook their heads. Meanwhile, 2 young men were as white as a sheet. Needless to say, they were Daytona and Haytona. Ever since the beginning of their ill-fated relationship with Jin back at the Storm Castle, the twins couldn't see Jin as a little brother. To them, Jin was a monster. Do you think that? Jin actually killed the Beastman. Haytona spoke as he grabbed his twin's shoulder. His hand was visibly shaking in fear. No matter how strong that monster is, a white wolf beastman is impossible for him. I thought so. A relieved smile grew on Haytona's face. But Daytona turned to his brother and stared at him in the eyes. But it's not important whether he actually killed a white wolf beastman or not, Haytona. What's more urgent is that we're done for if he advances to the intermediate class. Despair rooted itself in the Tana twins' eyes as they visibly lost their will to live. In truth, the twins were hoping deep down that Jin would fail his mission miserably. They were expecting for his advancement to be postponed due to his failure, and in the meantime, the twins would train harder than ever to grow stronger. And once Jin finally advanced to the intermediate class, they wouldn't have to quiver in fear of their little brother. However, it was all over for them. Not only did Jin successfully rescue the missing individual, he also defeated a white wolf beastman. In fact, Jin was considered a hero amongst the cadets in the beginner class. Fuck. Sure, he could have been stronger than us back at the Storm Castle since we were all so young, but really? Even now? We shouldn't have messed with him back when he first joined the beginner training class. Daytona sighed deeply as he recalled past events. Back when the Tana twins were in their second year of the beginner class, there was a period of time when they fervently bullied Jin. As they had started learning proper swordsmanship 2 years earlier than Jin, the twins were stronger than their brother for a short while. Those first few months were full of delight and exhilaration. They could use the spars as a pretext to beat up their brother, who used to boss the twins around back at the Storm Castle. It wouldn't be wrong to say that those months were the best days of their lives. However, their happiness didn't last long. A few months after Jin joined the training class, the twins got clobbered and thrashed by their little brother in front of the cadets almost every day. And now, that nightmare was about to start over again, as their devil of a brother would soon join the intermediate training class. This is depressing. Haytona spoke as he recalled the same events as his twin. His voice was weak and feeble, as if his soul was escaping through his mouth. Wait, no. No. It might be all right. We might be able to win against him. Our hard work so far in the intermediate class won't go to waste. Haytona spoke with hope as he changed his mind. No, we can't win against him. Honestly, I can't believe that he defeated a white wolf beastman. But I'm sure that story has some level of truth behind it. The twins lowered their heads once again and sighed. They were fully aware that they were below Jin in the food chain. While the Tana brothers stood in dismay, mute and snorted and sneered. Right, I forgot we had these morons within the family. Sheesh, are you actually terrified that the youngest is advancing to the intermediate class? Kaya, hi. The twins glared back at them with tomato-red faces, but that only lasted for 2 seconds. Since they were in the middle of the 3-star stage, they wouldn't dare anger their 7-star elder sisters. Daytona, you just went hike and squeal like a pig, right? Wanting to break your arm and put you in the pig pen. That's not it. Oh, aren't you missing something there? That's not it, elder sister. The sisters laughed as they watched the Tana twins. After a while, Mew and grabbed one Tana each and kissed them on the forehead. Geez, we're just kidding. Our little brothers are just so cute. I know, right? They're so sweet that sometimes I want to bite them and crush them into little pieces, you know? The brothers trembled as they watched their sisters express their excessive love for them. Then Mew suddenly smacked her lips and grinned. So, our dear little brothers are scared of Jin, as if we'd fear the youngest elder sister. Ha! There's no way that's. Shush. You can be honest, you know? Keep in mind that I absolutely detest liars. We're scared of him. This time, and wore an evil grin as she nodded. Mew and were a great sister duo that got along very well, just like the twins. Then do you want us to help you out? Ow! When there's a will, there's a way. And he's just about to get in the intermediate class, right? The Runcandel's intermediate training class. It was on a completely different scale compared to the beginner class. The weaker cadets were at the 3-star stage, while the stronger ones were around the 5-star stage. There were far more members compared to the beginner class. The intermediate class was no different to a wild savanna or jungle, a place where the law of the survival of the fittest applied. In this setting, 3-star knights are herbivores, 4 stars are strong herbivores, and 5-star knights are savage predators. It was a completely different environment and atmosphere compared to the current beginner class, where the cadets considered each other as comrades and helped each other out. As the spectrum of cadets was quite wide, from 3-star to 5-star, there were several cadets who had remained within the intermediate class for over 10 years. Mew and were using these senior intermediate cadets as slaves and pushing them around. I'll tell our slaves in the intermediate class about you too. Use them to trample on the youngest. They may be untalented pieces of crap who couldn't even graduate from the intermediate class, but they're still 5-star knights. They should be somewhat useful. Do you understand? Oh, the Tana twins' eyes glittered. Are you handing over your faction within the intermediate class to us, elder sisters? For real. As there were 13 siblings, there were obviously factions within the Runcandel clan. Even the Tana twins had somewhat created their own faction within the intermediate class. In fact, one could consider the current beginner class cadets to be part of Jin's faction. Haha, we're just lending them to you, you foolish boys. I don't like how the youngest is growing rapidly either. It makes me uncomfortable. If you use our slaves and fail to trample on Jin, then you too better prepare yourselves, my adorable brothers. The Tana twins squeezed their fists tightly and nodded. If they used their sister's 5-star cadets, then destroying Jin wasn't just a pipe dream. Is someone talking about me? Jin thought as he scratched his ear after finishing his report. T/and in Korea, there's this superstition where people believe that if their ears are itchy, it means someone is talking about them behind their back. I hear you successfully completed your first mission. Congratulations, young master. Your nanny is so proud of you. Thanks, Gilly. Can you prepare the warm water? I want to take a bath. Everything's already been prepared. You're the best. Yes, and being at home was the best as well. Jin began humming to himself. As he had been camping outside for an entire week, he missed taking a warm bath with pleasing soap scents. Oi, kid. But before Jin could enter the bathroom, an angry Murakan stood in his way. Oh, my dearest Nabi Runcandel. I missed you so, Moo. Did you lose your freaking mind? I don't see what you're talking about. Jin flinched and avoided making eye contact with Murakan. How many times did I tell you not to awaken the sword? You could die if things go wrong, all right? Are your ears the problem here, or is it your head? Answer me. I'll get rid of one of those two for you. Huh? Why would the great black dragon talk of such grim stuff? There were some circumstance. Who? Some circumstances? So, those circumstances were more important than your own life? Where in the world are there circumstances that are more important than Soderet's one and only contractor, HUH? Lord Murakan, please calm down for now. The young master only just came back from. Stay out of this, strawberry pie. This is a serious conversation between us two. Understood. Wait, Murakan. You see, I didn't do it intentionally. My cadet was kidnapped right in front of me, so how could I let them be? And I almost ended up becoming minced meat under the hands of the White Wolf Beastman. The pendant. Is Orgul's pendant around your neck just for decoration? You could have summoned your sister using that. That would have been a waste. You never know who I'll fight against in the future, so how could I use it now? A waste. Do you value that pendant more than your own life? My head hurts from talking with you. Ugh. Murakan held his head with his hands and fell. A flustered Gilly quickly ran and caught him. Are you okay, Lord Murakan? Hey, you alright? Don't faint for something like this. Whatever. Fuck, what's done is done. It's a waste of time for me to get angry now. It just overheats my head and makes me collapse. However, as Gilly supported him, Murakan grinned from ear to ear. It was such a satisfied smile that Jin wondered whether he was actually mad at him or whether he was just acting to get some skinship with Gilly. PR/N, my man with the Muzuvisis. By the way, Murakan, how did you know I awakened the sword? Your spiritual energy suddenly spiked up to the 4-star middle stage. So how could I not know? You blasted kid. Do you think the promised contractor of 1,000 years can just jump up a rank after a simple week-long outing like that? I did feel stronger than before after experiencing the spiritual energy congestion, but I didn't know it was by a whole rank. Jin could only scream in delight on the inside. In truth, he was secretly concerned as his spiritual energy had suddenly increased, but seeing Murakan's reaction, it seemed there were no side effects to worry about. Be thankful to Soderet for being interested in you. I've seen 10 people experience spiritual energy congestion in my lifetime, and 9 out of 10 died from it. No, I guess it's 9 out of 11 now. Who's the other person who survived? The first patriarch. No, it was me. Timar would have died from it too. Buffed. Murakan and Jin chuckled simultaneously. Anyways, I dare you to attempt to awaken the sword again. Aren't you happy that you've jumped to 4-star in mere instance? Well, that's the reward for putting your life on the line. So I dare you to try awakening the sword again before reaching 5-star. Because you'll definitely die this time around. I don't want to go through that painful experience a second time either. Anyways, are you finished scolding me? I'm going to take a bath now. Jin darted away and ran to the bathroom. Strawberry pie, don't give him dinner today. We need to starve him for at least 2 days in order to set his mind straight. Understand? Murakan spoke as he saw Jin scurrying away. I apologize, Lord Murakan. I cannot ignore my duties of serving the young master. Geez, I'm so jealous of him. It's driving me crazy. That kid was born with such good fortune that he's overflowing with luck now. As he relaxed in the warm bath, Jin thought about the fruits of his latest mission. He had strengthened the cadet's admiration and faith towards him. Where else would someone find a Runcandel who would willingly put their life on the line to rescue a mere cadet? Normally speaking, 100 cadets would be forced to risk their lives to save a single Runcandel. Many of the beginner cadets held great potential. Mesa and Bellop were obviously very promising, but most of the cadets who participated in the mission were also very gifted. None of them would ever forget Jin's valor when rescuing Mesa in their lifetime. I didn't necessarily act like I did to gain their trust or admiration, but it doesn't hurt to have those. Rescuing Mesa wasn't a calculated scheme. Jin has lived for 43 years if you include his past life. So as a skilled, strong, and mature human being, he couldn't sit by and do nothing as a young girl got kidnapped and almost had terrible things done to her. If Jin hadn't saved Mesa during this mission, he would have been plagued by a sense of guilt and shame for a long while. And he hadn't regressed to relive a life of such disgrace. He had experienced more than enough feelings of helplessness in his first life. It was now time for him to live a different lifestyle. Swoosh. A black ball of energy formed on top of his wet, soapy palm. So this is 4-star spiritual energy. It didn't appear different on the outside from back when it was 3-star. However, the weight was different. The ball of spiritual energy pulsating on his hand felt substantially heavier than before. 4-star spiritual energy had as much destructive power as 6-star aura and mana. It was on a different level compared to ordinary forces. In fact, due to his spiritual energy, the current Jin was stronger than he ever was in his past life in terms of pure destructive power. But since my swordsmanship is still 3-star, I can't make full use of the spiritual energy. Spiritual power is most effective when used with a sword. Moreover, its effect is maximized when used with Bradamanti or Barasata, swords that were specially crafted to channel spiritual energy. Sadaret is the god of shadows as well as the god of swords. Therefore, it was to no surprise that spiritual power and magic weren't a good match. Although magicians yearn for Sadaret, they are only interested in the superior strength of spiritual power. But just because they're not a good match doesn't mean they're useless with one another. It was all a question of efficiency. And now, Jin had the freedom of choice to select the most efficient methods at all times, as he could also combine magic with swordsmanship if he wanted. I should reach 6-star swordsmanship in the next 5 years. 6-star swordsmanship. It is commonly known that 1-star to 2-star are considered novice knights, 3 to 4-star are common knights, 5 stars are superior knights, and finally, 6 stars are elite knights. The rankings for magicians are more or less the same as for knights. 7-star onwards are master knights. However, there are countless masters around the world, which comes to no surprise as the continent has a population of 2 billion people. 7-star is only considered a transcendental realm amongst ordinary people. However, amongst warriors, the 8-star stage and onwards is truly considered exceptional. There are noticeably less people who have reached 8-star around the world. As for the 9-star stage, there probably exist less than 100, even if one were to find every single eccentric hermit training in seclusion. Needless to say, there are far less than that at 10-star. Finally, the stage where there exists only one person. The unique realm, Genesis. That is the realm where one has transcended the limitations of humanity and has become a demigod. T/N, the Korean word the author uses for Genesis, has several meanings, and they didn't specify which one. Previously, the same Korean word was used for Jin Runcandel's title, True Holy Knight. So technically, we should have translated it as True Holy. But according to the context here, we decided that True Holy wasn't the right one and changed it to Genesis. So from now on, Jin will be called the Genesis Knight. I'll definitely reach that realm in this life. No, I'll surpass that realm. In order to do that, Jin first had to successfully deal with his siblings' schemes and ruses once he advanced to the intermediate training class. Although Mew and the Tana twins were conversing in a secluded area earlier, Jin could already predict the twins' movements. He was already anticipating all their possible plans of action. As someone who had lived at the bottom of the Runcandel food chain for 25 years in his past life, there was no way Jin didn't know about their schemes. Jin had never experienced the intermediate training class in his first life due to dropping out of the beginner class. But he was more than aware that the intermediate class was like the wilderness, a place where only the strongest survive. In other words, logic and reason were unnecessary in the intermediate training class. It was the same in the jungles around the continent. Although there are some smart and cunning animals at times who use their brains to survive, most of them are in the middle or bottom of the food chain. In that case, which animals live peacefully in the jungle without being bothered? I'll dominate the intermediate class with pure power. The ferocious predators that hold absolute strength. Translator, coconut moth. Proofreader, Hercules, beetle. https://discord.gg/mergmfhrb. February 1795. The cadets' results and scores have been announced. All the members who accompanied Jin on the mission have advanced to the intermediate class. As the valedictorian of the beginner training class, Jin received a medal and the encouragement of the Runcandel clan's elders. All the cadets that advanced have now moved to their new dormitories. Jin also received an offer from the second butler, Petro, to change rooms. Rosa had prepared a large room at the center of the mansion for her youngest son. The room was previously used by Joshua Runcandel in his youth, Jin's eldest brother. After Joshua stopped using the room, no one was allowed to use it ever since. Petro, tell my mother that I'm fine where I am right now. I'd like to continue using this room. Young Master Jin, the room young Master Joshua used to use, is the best in the Garden of Swords and holds great significance. It is the room that was only bestowed to the clan's eldest son. I know that much, but tell mother that I just prefer it here so that she doesn't get upset. Understood. Petro had gained a good understanding of Jin's personality over the past few years. The 13th young master he knew had never changed his mind after making a decision. That's why it was such a pity. The room, symbolizing the eldest son, had been offered to him. So why was he refusing it? Jin's other siblings could only suck their thumbs while secretly wishing they'd receive the room for themselves. Young master, please reconsider one more time. I'm thankful for your concern, but I already said I didn't need it. And if you think it's a pity, use the room for yourself. Young master. In the end, it's just a room. You may take your leave. I don't really enjoy using such big and burdensome rooms. Petro lowered his head in response, as if he had gotten a wind of Jin's intention. The butler couldn't believe that the 13th young master, a 15-year-old boy, had such deep insight. He noticed that the madam offered the room to him as a test instead of a reward. Petro then returned to Rosa and informed her of Jin's decision. Jin refused. Yes, madam. Rosa listened as she rested her chin on one hand and hummed softly. She was content with Jin's refusal of receiving Joshua's room. Jin, I sometimes can't distinguish if our youngest son has no desires or has too many of them. The room Jin had refused was none other than the great Runcandel clan's eldest son's room. It remained empty ever since Joshua moved out of it. In other words, it implied that the room was only bestowed to the child who would be responsible for the clan in the future. As soon as they took a step inside the room, they'd get the full backing from the clan. And Jin had immediately realized that this beautiful offer was sweet bait connected to a terrifying fishing line. As soon as he moved into that room, Jin would have been targeted by all his siblings. Mother is annoyingly insistent. Clack. Jin left his room with Bradamanti on his hip. He was going out to check on the cadets he'd train, with starting tomorrow at the intermediate training class. Good morning, young master. Scott, gather all the cadets who advanced to the intermediate class. Yes. A total of 9 cadets gathered in Scott's room, including Mesa and Bellup. Although they pretended to be fine, you could see the stress and unease in their eyes. We'll be in the intermediate class starting tomorrow. Have you all resolved yourselves? Yes. As you may know, the intermediate class is divided into several forces under the name of factions. The cadets all nodded in unison. They knew better than anyone else that they were the only people in Jin's faction. The cadets also knew they'd be the targets of harassment, threats, and coercion due to that. It was a natural occurrence. While the other cadets couldn't torment a pure-blooded Runcandel, they could still target his faction. There's no need to be afraid. I called you all here to say that. Yes. The cadets answered with determined faces. Jin found their behavior adorable and endearing. It was obvious who would be the first to aim at these kids starting tomorrow. First off, the Tana twins. Although the twins were probably still afraid of Jin right now, he was certain that they were scheming something, and someone else who will help the Tana twins to keep me in check. It's highly likely to be elder sisters Mew or Anne. It could also be elder brother Vigo. Whoever the Tana twins' backer was, Jin was planning on outsmarting them. I'll see you all tomorrow. Oh, and during hours outside of training sessions, make sure you move around in groups of 3 minimum. You are forbidden from acting individually until I completely conquer the intermediate class. Understood. Starting from intermediate training class, the cadets aren't taught by a guest instructor from outside the clan like Garen Altamiro. It's an elder of the Runcandel clan who is in charge of the cadets. The elders of the clan who used to be 8-star or higher knights in their youth take turns teaching the class. They also used to be flag bearers of the clan who failed to become the patriarch. Currently, there are around 150 cadets in the intermediate class. The elder who has been in charge of instructing them the past few years is Jin Runcandel. He, who was once famed for being an 8-star knight, was Siren's younger brother. Attention! Attention! The cadets repeated Zed's command as they stood at the training ground. This year, we have 10 new cadets amongst us, while 27 dropped out. Zed spoke with a displeased look as he stood on the platform. He was dissatisfied by how there were more dropouts than newcomers. Newbies, learn from your seniors how an intermediate cadet's lifestyle is. My role is only to teach swordsmanship and evaluate everyone. As long as there are no deaths, just deal with all your internal problems between yourselves. Understood. I asked the seniors. What is it that I always emphasize? The Runcandels have no need for weaklings. The Runcandels have no need for weaklings. The intermediate cadets suddenly yelled in unison and continued chanting the motto as they stared at the newcomers. Moreover, there was obvious malice in their gazes. Jin's cadets were pressured by their stares and shouts that they had a hard time keeping their heads up. Anyone around the world would also feel oppressed by a sudden ceremony where their seniors preyed on them with a morbid warning. Amongst the group of people shouting the motto were the Tana twins. Standing around them were several 4- and 5-star knights, who were all part of Mew and Anne's factions. How noisy. Anyways, the Tana twins are over there. There are a few people around them with deep frowns. Ah, they're from elder sister Anne's faction. The Runcandels have no need for weaklings. The Runcandels have no need for weaklings. The chanting continued endlessly. The intermediate cadets seemed to be planning on shouting the warning until the newcomers all lowered their heads. Suddenly, Jin stepped forward and approached the twins. His steps were light and relaxed as if he were taking a mere walk. Why is he coming over here? Don't be afraid. Just think of destroying him starting from today. The Tana twins communicated with their gazes and began yelling louder than ever. Zed watched Jin with great interest as he stroked his beard. Jin's pace didn't slow down. It appeared like he wouldn't stop until he stood centimeters away from the twins. The other intermediate cadets shifted their gazes from the newcomers to the Runcandel boy. SKRRT. Jin unsheathed Bradamani out of nowhere and cut something. Arg! The cadets' deafening chanting ended instantly. Their jaws dropped as they watched the astonishing scene before them in shock. The Tana twins were petrified like stone statues. Zed's hand also froze halfway down his beard. Jin had sliced off a forearm, the forearm that belonged to one of the cadets standing around the twins. As a member of Anne's faction, he was a 5-star knight. In other words, he was at the top of the food chain in the intermediate class. Until now, there was no way the cadet could have predicted or defended himself from that surprise attack. Even if one were a pure-blooded Runcandel, who in their right mind would brandish their sword on their first day in the intermediate class. During the warning, welcoming ceremony organized by Jin Runcandel. To boot, as blood gushed out of the cadet's wound, the Tana twins couldn't do anything as they panicked. The heat and excitement that was overwhelming the training ground moments ago had completely vanished. The 150 pairs of gazes were all concentrated on Jin, but the boy in question didn't give any explanation for his actions and simply sheathed his sword. Instead, he spoke with a composed tone. Call the medical team. Jean thought to himself. The ones that needed a warning weren't him and his cadets. It was their seniors.